Simple, David.
Where's Jim?
I didn't see him.
Got a beer? What you asking that?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June 9th, 2003 meeting of the Haltom City Council. It's been about a month since we had an opportunity to meet like this. We do have quite a few items to cover in the regular agenda, and then we've got some discussion to take place in executive session, so we may be here for a while. But we have a capacity crowd tonight, almost capacity, and thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, for taking an interest in your city, and showing that interest by being here for this council meeting tonight. And to those of you who are watching on HCTV, we're always glad to have you tuning in. We believe we have some important matters to discuss that that have to do with the dreams and the vision for what we want Haltom City to be, and this council is meeting tonight to take action on some of these items. We began tonight with our invocation and pledge of allegiance. Councilmember David Averett is responsible for that. David, you have a comment you want to make before I ask the audience to stand for these two?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Tonight I will be yielding my invocation to Miss Brenda Staub, our City Secretary, who will be giving our invocation for us tonight.
Okay. If you will, let's stand for the invocation and the pledge.
Please pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the beautiful day. Thank you for the so many things that you bestow on us. Thank you for allowing us to meet, to discuss the future of Haltom City, to come together and be a team. But most of all, Lord, thank you very much for watching over my son and the many sons and daughters that are overseas fighting for our country. And please continue to watch over them and bring them safely home. Thank you for everything that you give us every day. And thank you for, again, allowing us to be here to make the decisions for the welfare of Haltom City. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We appreciate Ms. Staub leading our invocation and pledge tonight, and you probably noticed some intensity in the prayer and in her speaking the Pledge of Allegiance. She has a son in Iraq. He's been there a few months, and we're all concerned about all of our troops there, and Ms. Staub has some special concerns, and we appreciate Councilmember Averett for yielding to allow her to lead us in that under these circumstances. I would encourage you, if you wish to address the council tonight at any point along the way, that you fill out one of these yellow speaker request forms. We've had a number of them turned in already. If you want to address the council and you have not already done so, if you will, please fill that out immediately and hand it to Councilmember Sutton or Council on that one end or Councilmember Branson on the other, and they'll see that it gets on to me. So if you would. We're always pleased to have our citizens speak at our council meetings, but this helps us to be more efficient and more orderly in the process. We come tonight to item number 1 on the agenda, if you're following along, and that is a presentation by the Parks and Recreation Board. And George Fowler, do you want to introduce this matter and introduce who will be presenting this information regarding the purpose and the duties of the Park and Recreation Board? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fowler is our Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Citizens, just want to take a minute to introduce Shannon Stewart, our Park Board member who is going to present our program tonight. And the program has to do with what the Parks and Recreation Board does, what their function is, and where we're going, where we've been and where we're going. Shannon?
Good evening. I'd like to take just a moment and welcome the new council members, Ms. Bransom and Mr. Sutton. We look forward to the great things I know that you are going to do for Haltom City. I'd like to first of all apologize. I was supposed to present a couple of weeks ago, and my allergies and I were having a battle, and they won. So I'm finally feeling better, and I think we're ready to go with our presentation. I'm going to have Mr. Fowler on hand for any questions that you may have about current and future projects that may be going on. So I'm going to walk over now to present. Thank you.
If you don't mind, just a moment, in order for the people who are watching on TV to be able to hear the comments that are made, Ms. Stewart, can we move the microphone? And if you don't mind, speak into the microphone. We want everybody to hear the good things you have to say about Parks and Rec.
I need to click. I need to drive. Tonight we're going to talk about the Parks and Recreation Board of Haltom City and where we are today and where we're going in the future. Who we are. We have our director, George Fowler, and if each of the board members will stand up as I say your name, please. Place 1, we have Deanne Russell. Place 2, Steve Milius. Place 3, Jody Allen. Place 4, Howard Hoyle. Place 5, Paul Strong. Place 6, Britt Ford. Place 7, myself. Place 8, Roland Coolman. What do we do at the Parks and Recreation Board? Well, we happen to think that we have the most fun in Haltom City because Parks and Rec is just where it's at. We do parks, special events, adult and youth classes, and senior citizen center. Our current and most popular project is the reconstruction and renovation center of the Recreation Center. And I know for the citizens of Haltom City, it won't be finished any too soon. This is a photo of the groundbreaking ceremony for our new rec center. That was in January of this year. I'm going to refer to my notes here on the timeline. It's projected to complete December 5th, 2003. That's this year. Some of the improvements of the new rec center include an addition of 13,000 square feet, which will bring the new rec center to 27,000 square feet total. It's going to include a dedicated exercise room, 2 dedicated rooms for arts and crafts, a multi-purpose weight room, small youth gym, office space, conference rooms, and youth area game rooms. Some of the benefits include an increased diversity of activities, less interference between activities, which is going to be a huge benefit, a new weight room, and most importantly, separation between the youth and the adult classes. We have 8 parks in Haltom City split up by sectors. North, Central, and South sector. In the north, we have Buffalo Ridge Park and North Park. In the Central sector, we have Broadway Park, Little Fossil Park, and Haltom Road Park. In the South sector, we have Pecan Park, Parish Road Neighborhood Park, and Sandy Oaks Park. Here's just a couple of photos. You have Buffalo Ridge on the left and Haltom Road Park on the right, and one of our neighborhood parks. Here's some photos of the improvements that we recently made to the Broadway Park. Special events in Haltom City include the Haltom Stampede, the Spring Fest and Easter egg hunt, July 4th celebration, and the Halloween Carnival and Haunted House. The Haltom Stampede is a 5 and 10K run. It's broken up in 14 age divisions, and approximately 600 participants come to this thing every year, and it's growing with each year. And some other keynotes you should know about the Haltom Stampede is it raises between $4,000 and $5,000 a year that goes back into our parks. That's actually revenue for the city, for the city's parks. So I encourage everyone to come out to that. It happens every second Saturday of February. The Spring Fest is a lot of fun if you haven't been. It's a celebration of Easter. We have Peter Cottontail there. He has Easter egg hunts for the kids ages 11 and down. And there's free entertainment, craft vendors are there, food and games for the children. It's quite a day. If you'll humor me with my one moment of fame for my little niece, Brittany Stewart. This was her with Peter Cottontail this year. Hi, Brittany. Our July 4th celebration includes a parade, picnic, music, and fun for the whole family. And George is going to kill me for this one, but that's him having a little fun last year. Our Halloween Carnival and Haunted House is a whole lot of fun. It's obviously the spookiest event of the year. We have games for the kids, a haunted house, a costume contest, and so much more. There's a couple of pictures of the little ones that won last year. Our adult and youth classes and leagues and programs. We offer dance classes, tap lessons, martial arts, ceramic, oil painting, china painting, and step aerobics. I myself intend to get involved with the step aerobics pretty soon. For leagues and athletic programs, if you're interested, you can call 831-6465. Our Senior Citizen Center is located at 5000 Bernice. For a list of activities there, you can call 834-8021. There's a photo of our Senior Citizen Center and some of the activities that they get involved in, which was in particular Halloween last year. For a list of classes and special events, please call this number, and I really encourage you to do that during this interim session of our renovation, 831-6464. Our plan for the future is to build a community park for all the citizens in Haltom City that would include a pool and I don't know what else. Hasn't been decided at this time, but I encourage the council and the citizens to move forward. It's something that's very needed in Haltom City. And that concludes the Parks and Recreation Board of Haltom City.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart, for that presentation, and thanks to all the volunteers on the Parks and Rec Board who put in a lot of hours and devote a lot of time and energy to making good things happen here in Haltom City. Members of the council, questions or comments for Ms. Stewart before we move on from this point? Councilmember Williams?
I just want to thank Ms. Stewart for coming out and presenting that. And I also want to thank the dedication to each one of the park board members. We got some new members on there, and I know they got some exciting things. So thank you for the time and dedication you give us to that.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just also want to thank our park board members. I know they do they spend a lot of time up there, and not only our park board members, but our senior community gets very involved with the Park and Recreation Department as well as the Senior Citizen Center, and that's another, people don't realize seniors is part of our Park and Recreation Department, and I want to thank them and thank the staff for all their diligence and all the hard work that they do. The parks have come a long ways. If anyone's noticed Broadway Park, the playing facilities out there are much improved from when I was a youth. I would have loved to have the opportunity to play on the facilities there, and believe that the rec center, once it's complete, along with the fire station and public works, is going to be a great asset to our community and something we can all be very proud of. So look forward to doing that, and everyone stay patient. Give us 6 or 8 months, and some of it will get completed. Thank you.
Mr. Fowler, any comments you want to make in closing?
Just real quick, thank you for the nice presentation, Shannon. Thanks to the park board members for being here. Thanks for the council for allowing us to do this. And I'd like to also say that a majority of the larger parks, Buffalo Ridge, Haltom Road, Pecan Park, Parish Road Park, and the renovation to Broadway Park have taken place since 1997. That's a lot of work, and it's a lot of nice facilities for all the citizens of Haltom City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. We have a lot of people who volunteer in Haltom City, and what we've been doing over the last number of council meetings is to put the spotlight on one of our boards and commissions as a way of just letting our citizens know what they do, but also to say thank you to the people who work on those boards and commissions. We move now to the consent agenda, and if you have an agenda with you, that consists of items number 2 through 9. We're going to be removing items 6 and 7, and we will take action on that in connection with item number 11 when we get to that point in the meeting a little bit later. For the benefit of those in the audience here in council chamber, as well as those who are watching, items on the consent agenda are considered to be pretty self-explanatory within themselves, and they'll be enacted rather than individually. They'll be acted by the council in one motion. Approval of this consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each item in accordance with the staff or board recommendation. So having made that statement, I'm in line for a motion regarding the consent agenda. Councilmember Avery.
Mayor, I'll make a motion. We approve the consent agenda with the removal of items number 6 and 7.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilmember Hurley.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? There being none, if you'll register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote. We come now to the Visitor Citizens Forum, and let me take just a moment to explain what this is for the benefit of those of you who may not know. This is a time we set aside in each council meeting for any person who might have business to bring before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda, to give them an opportunity to speak to the council. Those individuals that will be recognized tonight are people who have completed a speaker's request form, and the city secretary has those in her hand, and I'll take those one at a time in just a moment, but all comments that are made by those who speak at this time need to be directed to the presiding officer rather than to an individual council member, staff, or audience individual. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on the speaker's request form, and they must refrain from personal attacks toward any individual. A 5-minute time limit will be granted, and the city secretary will be keeping time for us tonight. And one last comment, council cannot discuss or debate any issue brought forth at this time. No formal action can be taken by the council on any of these items because it has not been posted on the agenda in accordance with the open meetings law. So having said that, the first speaker's request form, Bertie Blocker. Ms. Blocker, if you will, come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and the subject you've listed on the agenda is tree ordinance.
My name is Bertie Blocker. I live at 3733 East Ridge Drive. I want to thank the mayor and council for allowing me to come before you. I want to speak tonight about our tree ordinance. Section 86.111 says that height restriction must be 13 foot above the street or sidewalk. I've passed out a brochure. I think it's the last item we highlighted it. Section 86.112 says citizens have the duty to remove those branches and keep it 13 foot above the street at all times. Our city has just entered into what we call Clean Sweep campaign. That campaign is to get rid of junk vehicles, furniture, anything that's unsightly or visible from the street. Simply said, clean it up. Residents and businesses alike have been asked to make this a cleaner, safer community by removing all obstacles that might cause a safety hazard. Espunda is now in the full swing of trimming trees in our city. And I use that word loosely because if you've seen what they do, I want to say butcher rather than trim. But anyway, they are taking down a lot of tree limbs. And I'm asking that the council urge our citizens to complete this by doing the trees in their own yard. I know of trees that have dead branches that are likely to fall and hurt someone. I see branches that cover our yield and stop signs. I see branches that make it almost impossible for our emergency vehicles to get down the street without damaging the equipment. I'm asking the City Council to urge our citizens by way of cable TV, maybe a blurb on the water bill, in our Proud and Progressive brochure that goes out every other month, make people aware. I don't believe that people are aware that this is an ordinance. I don't think anyone is trying not to obey the law. They just don't know it's there. So this little booklet, I think we need to put this in our Proud and Progressive. I think, like I say, on cable TV, whatever we can do to make people aware that this is important, that they keep their tree limbs up above the street and sidewalks. And I want to thank you for letting me come before you.
Thank you, Ms. Blocker. And our next speaker tonight is Margot Westenheiser, who wishes to speak on the subject of code enforcement. Ms. Westenheiser, if you will come forward to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to address the council.
Ladies and gentlemen, City Council, I'm Margot Westenheiser and I own and live on the property 3040 Carey Lane. I moved to Haltom City 18 years ago and bought an as-is house 14 years on 3040 Carey Lane. I knew I took a big project on, but I thought when I do my part, the city would stand behind me. After all, our slogan is Proud and Progressive. In 1994, I attended a council meeting. One of the laws which was passed was that no more metal carports would be permitted to be built in Haltom City. In 95, after a big hailstorm, I decided to build a garage so my next car would be protected from hail. I went for a permit and was informed it would not be issued since my house was located in a floodway. I had bought already the garage doors. However, regardless what I suggested so the water could have run off, I was turned down. I was informed that I could build a wooden carport if my neighbors would agree to it. I had to go and collect signatures from my neighbors before I was issued a permit. I built my carport the same year. About 2 years later, I saw a garage being built on the southwest corner of Haltom Road and Fossil. It was in the same flood level where I was denied to build the garage. I called Haltom City and was told that it was an oversight. However, I found out that the homeowner was on the city council. I realized we had double standards. Since then, 2 metal carports have gone up in my neighborhood. No permits. Even though I contacted Haltom City, nothing was done. I worked very hard on my home and I invested a lot of money in it. I landscaped the front and the back, built a deck, patio, wooden walkways in the back, flower beds. However, 10 years ago, I noticed bamboo growing on the east side of my property line. The property line of me, which goes all the way to Fossil Creek, belongs to my neighbor south of me. I have been digging bamboo up for 10 years. Now it is 14 to 16 feet tall. It is killing some of my tree branches because they can't get any light and oxygen. My Rose of Sharon are dying because they can't get any light. Spring flowers don't bloom for the same reason. The bamboo covers now 2/3 of the property line. I called last year the code enforcement and was informed that he has the right to grow the same. This year, the bamboo has grown 10 foot into my property. The roots grow under my wooden walkway. I counted at least 30 new bamboo shoots on my property. I contacted code enforcement again without results. Mr. Gent commented that he grew that bamboo for fishing poles for his friends. The only people who ever got some of the poles was my neighbor across north from me. I'm not disagreeing that Mr. Gent cannot grow bamboo. However, putting it on my property line where he owns all that property seems almost like a hate crime. I know that the city council can make laws. Wouldn't it be more fair when anyone who wants to plant bamboo on their neighbor's property line had to put a divider into the ground so the roots would not intrude on their neighbor's property? I am 71 now, and work like this is just getting too hard for me. I don't have the finances to hire someone, since Uncle Sam pays me only $414 Social Security. My question to the council is this only selective code enforcement, or am I being discriminated against for being a single woman, or that I'm German? I'm looking for a solution and don't know whether it will do any good to talk here tonight or later with the media. I have the papers from the flood zone. I also have the papers from the property.
Ms.
what Mr.
Westenheimer,
Gent owes and I owe.
your 5 minutes are completed. If you'll take about 30 seconds and wrap up, and do you have anything?
I'm only vaguely familiar with the bamboo situation. I was
Yeah.
told, I didn't even know how that got resolved, if it was resolved
It
at all. but
hasn't been resolved.
I've made a note of your phone number, and I'll give you a call, and we can sit down and talk about it, and maybe there is something we can do. But I think the bamboo is going to be a very difficult issue to tackle. I don't think there's any ordinance in place that technically
Let me
prohibits
ask
the
you a
situation.
question.
So.
What would Haltom City do when you have a park and you have it landscaped and everything, and the property owner next to you plants bamboo on the property line, and it comes all out in Haltom City landscaping? What would you do?
Ms. Westenheimer, part of the rules that we are required to enforce in this particular part of the meeting, and I understand your frustration and your concern, but we're not able to discuss or debate the issue that you've brought forth because it was not posted by law 72 hours in advance. The city manager has offered to get with you on this matter, and that's how we'll have to approach that from this point forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker tonight is Mr. Bill Journay. Mr. Journay, if you will come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and the subject you have requested to speak before the council tonight is on the subject of holiday cops.
Thank you, council. My name is Bill Journay. I live in Haltom City, 4529 Nadine. And incidentally, as a proud grandfather, I've brought a couple of pictures of my spoiled granddaughter, age 19. The reason I brought these, Airman Jill Journay died in a fatal accident March 15th of this year. And this is why I bring this to your attention. Not necessarily you, but cities and anyone else that's involved in law enforcement. I cannot believe that the only time we are given anything near proper protection on our streets and highways is around our holidays. Even then, at best, we can expect only seat belts and insurance checks. How very stupid of free, intelligent people. Neither the lack of insurance or seat belts are our major cause of our very serious traffic problems. Even if every motorist were covered and buckled, our serious traffic problems would still exist. Our holiday cops aren't helping much either. Neither does TV or newspaper sensationalizing for their holiday mission quote. True enough, they're doing all they can, but our irresponsible politicians and insurance companies aren't. Today, we are neither free nor safe, nor are our sales tax going for what they were first promised. At best, we are given gadgets, devices, speed bumps, and all of those cameras. It isn't working. In fact, it's worse. There is little or no social discipline, even during holidays, with insurance dictating our traffic laws and record services prowling our streets more prevalent than our police. Of course our streets are mean, even on holidays. Welcome to America. It doesn't matter how fast, dangerous, or irresponsible you drive anymore. If your insurance is paid and you're buckled, you're free to behave as you please. You see, it's about money. The insurance companies cannot raise their rates without this behavior. Any marketeer will agree with this. These people have become our most dangerous lobsters. Well, lobbyists, if you will. Our traffic fatalities today make 911 and the Iraq War and the Oklahoma City bombing look like minor infractions compared to our everyday auto fatalities. The number of our dead children are enormous. So what else are we doing for our children? Who has the stupid audacity to believe, or at least want us to believe, that the holiday cops are our salvation, or the government, or insurance, or both, or all three? Mr. Politicians, sirs, city council, state, federal, don't allow this evasion and deceit to have you replaced. Regardless of how much insurance companies woo you, you answer to the people. We want to be free and safe again. Spend our money on what you promised, rather than our government-controlled environments, instituted programs, gadgets, and devices that only pacify your people. Your holiday cops only help the auto insurance industry while we perish. We desperately need a change. Your political career could be history at our next election. Holiday cops, how ridiculous can you get? I think you're out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Journay, and from this mayor and this council, our sympathy to you and your family regarding the loss of your granddaughter. Our next speaker to come forward at this time is Wayne Clowers. Mr. Clowers, if you'll come forward. The subject you have listed here is Haley Street. If you will give us your name and address for the record, please.
Wayne Clowers, 5809 Highland Avenue. I have the vacant lot on Haley. Since we last talked, I've had a lot of people come up and said, hey, what about this? So I'm going to forward and let their ideas on. Number one person told me that Texas DOT requires that the street be 24 foot wide, or recommends that it be 24 foot wide. I understand that you're going to build it 20 feet wide. And they also recommend that if you're going to put in the ditches, that they have the slanted openings on them, and that's a recommendation that. And at least 2 people associated with Haley Drive have handicaps with leg problems, and the American Disabilities Act has some requirements there too. The only thing I could not find out if it's the same as a wheelchair or what. And I really don't think that's my job to go find that out either. What do I tell people when they ask, why is the city not putting curb and gutter? Well, some of the things that the people have pointed out to me is that it's depressing property values, and the people want fair treatment. Since the city voted to pay for curbs and gutters 3 years ago, they have the question now, does this mean no more curbs for anybody? Or are we just the only ones that are going to get it? curbs and gutters provide better drainage, are safer, especially for the handicapped. And the last point I want to point out, who voted for this, because I can't find a single city councilman support, that says they're for it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clowers. Any comment? Okay, our next speaker, Mr. Ray Eklund. And if you will, Mr. Eklund, come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and the subject on which you wish to speak is the Haley Street curbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. It's up around the corner from Haley, about 2 or 3 blocks. Familiar with the area. It has, for many years, had the bar ditches on both sides of the street. And I was concerned at the last council meeting that I attended when the city suggested they weren't going to put curb and gutter on this particular street. This neighborhood deserves a full and fair treatment as the other neighborhoods. The city's policy has been to come in for many, many years to put curb and gutters on the streets. I'm still paying for mine, 5-6 years now. So those of us that have to pay for it, we had to pull out gutters to put them back in. And now the city should upgrade this street so that the entire neighborhood enjoys the valuation increase that will help these property owners when these properties sell and turn over. We'll be talking about that again a little bit later, but I'm curious as to why the city chose not to curb and gutter the street. And there was one meeting, and bam, there it was. And like Mr. Clowers said, are we not going to curb and gutter any more streets again? Are we going to quit the process? We're going to quit paying for it? Are we going back to the old system where the citizens have to pay? What is the status with the curb and gutter situation? Right? The city voted approximately 3 years ago, right before the election, that the city would pay for the curb and gutters. Prior to that, the citizens had to pay. Okay, so whatever the system is, I believe that the curb and gutter should be placed on this street in our neighborhood because we've had numerous drainage and flooding problems throughout South Haltom City, which we've addressed before this council many times, and I think this deserves more attention. Thank you.
Mr. Eklund, if you'll remain in place just a moment, I think Mr. Torres, our city manager, has a comment. While we can't discuss this and get into any debate, I think he may have a comment to make that may be relevant.
I'm not sure I really have the answer that yourself or Mr. Clowers is seeking about whether or not, or why we're not putting curb and gutter out there. But I would tell you this, that for probably getting close to a year now, the plan all along has been to maintain the bar ditches there, but yet to make improvements to that street. Haley Street is not the only street in Haltom City that is being addressed with improvements that is not being not having curb and gutters placed. So it's not as if Haley Street has been picked out, singled out in any way on that. I could list a number of streets around town that have been improved over the past year. So I suspect it's reasonable to assume that Haltom City will very likely have to maintain a number of streets in the community that do not have curb and gutter, and it's simply about dollars. There's just not enough dollars to go around, and so we make some attempt to do some prioritization and try to pick streets that have a large amount of traffic on them, and that's some of the thinking, the thought process that goes into that. The thing that troubles me most is simply the fact that construction is well underway out there now, and there's been a number of people, rightfully so, that have complained that it's taken so long. If we even thought at this point about stopping and bringing in a contractor, because if we did get to the point where we were going to place curb and gutters on Haley Street, it would require a contractor to come in. We'd have to go through a bidding process, plans and specifications. It would take months to achieve, and the thought of stopping or holding up on that project right now does not sound attractive to me. I really believe that when the work is done, I think that the improvements to Haley Street will be massive, and the people will be very content. Yes, they may not be as content as they would have been with curb and gutter, but the improvements are going to be pretty significant, and they're going to be accomplished within just a matter of a couple of weeks. I really think that at this point, we have to proceed on with the plan that has been in place for close to a year.
Well, I'm sorry. I understand that this is not the place for debate, and I certainly wouldn't do that, but I'd like to add these comments. Okay? The south part of the city needs better planning. You don't just say, oh, we're running out of money. Okay? When it comes down to this particular neighborhood needs full and a lot of attention to keep it held back together. I visited with some of the city staff. Okay? They tell me that it's important that we keep the property values up. We're going to brick houses. We're going to do whatever it takes to make houses value goes up in this town. And yet, when the city's responsibility comes up, they tuck and run. Okay?
Mr. Eklund, the 5-minute time limit is more than gone. I need to ask a question of our city attorney. The discussion we've had so far, or whatever in Mr. Torres' comments, still are within the line of the open meetings law. Is that correct? The reason I'm asking that, I have Councilmember Fowler, whose light is on, to make comments here, and are we infringing on to the spirit of the open meetings law by making any comment? What do we need to do from this point forward regarding this issue?
The limitation on this topic is to respond with factual information about city policy or practice. But as you pointed out earlier, Mayor, the council members should not get into a debate or discussion under a citizens visitors forum about any topic that's brought up, but it's proper to recite what the city's practice or policy is in a factual basis.
Councilmember Fowler, does your comments that you were about to make or your questions fall within that guideline?
That's a good question, Mayor. It's in regards to Haley Street, as well as agenda item number 11 that's coming up regarding bar ditches. So
I'll leave this completely up to the attorney.
I don't know whether to discuss it now or I'll defer, and if these citizens from Haley Street would like to stay here, I'll comment on item number 11. It matters not to me.
To the extent it's relevant to item number 11, then
yes,
it's
sir.
Permissible for you to get in as much discussion as you would like.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Eklund, I believe you have another couple of speaker request forms. For the benefit of those of you in the audience, normally we have one speaker filling out one speaker's request card to speak on one subject, and Mr. Eklund's found a way to speak on a couple of 3 subjects. And in the absence of any precedent on how to address this, I'm going to extend the courtesy to Mr. Eklund tonight on these other 2, and in the meantime, the council may need to discuss how we proceed from here. But since you kind of caught us by surprise tonight on this one, you had asked to address the council under this speaker's request form on curbline mail delivery. Councilmember Williams, do you have
Yeah, I've got a question maybe to clarify that. I think the way that rules are said, if a citizen wants to speak like in the general visitors forum, and then say item number 11 or item 12, if they want to speak on that subject too, there's no limit. But I think you're limited 5 minutes regardless of what the subjects are. I don't know if someone's been here. Mr. Hurley might know.
5 minutes per person?
Regardless of the subject matters.
Okay. Mr. Eklund? Sorry about that.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but that's not how I read your form. And I was here when the thing was put in, and I believe in the First Amendment. So we need to take every opportunity. You haven't met in 6 weeks or a month to listen to this. Particularly this next one's going to be particularly important to the citizens of Haltom City, and nobody else in the room knows about it.
If they want to waive the right and let them go and do it, I don't have a problem. I'm just trying to clarify the rule. He can talk till the cows come home for all I care.
The subject you had filled out on this one has to do with curbline mail delivery, and that may well fit into item number 11.
I'm afraid that'd be a bit of a stretch.
Okay. That one comes on item number 11.
Oh, okay.
All right. We move on. I believe we have completed all that we're going to be addressing in the Visitor Citizens Forum at this time. Councilmember Fowler? Okay. Having addressed all of the subject matter under the Visitor Citizens Forum, we move now to the announcements and events, and once we do that, I think before we get into these items of other business, we might take a break, a 5-minute break, 5 or 10 minute break. But our first person to make an announcement regarding an event is Leslie Smith from our public library. If you would come forward to the podium, and I think you're going to talk to us about the summer reading camp. If you will, go ahead again and introduce yourself, even though I've told people.
Can everyone hear me? Because this is very important what I'm going to say. First off, I'm going to pass these out to the council. And I'd like for you to read these because there will be a test afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think, excuse me just
Yes.
a moment, we've got a procedural issue to take care
Sure.
of here. This is not an item under the Visitor Citizens Forum. This is just for announcements to be made. So do we need the name and address on that, Mr. Attorney?
I don't recall you requiring name and address for announcements and events in the past.
Okay, that having been cleared up, pardon my interruption again, Ms. Smith. Please
That's
proceed.
fine. I'm here from the public library to announce our summer reading program, our 2003 summer reading program. The theme this year is Mission Possible, Spy a Good Book. By the way, I speak very fast and I can't slow down, so you're going to have to listen fast. Thank you. Anyways, our reading program theme is Mission Possible, Spy a Good Book. Let me show you. Now, you all want one of these, right? Some of us over here already have one of these. Right?
If you don't mind, since I know you're trying to get this out on TV, we need to stay close to the microphone in order for this to be carried.
All right.
Thank you.
Anyways, this reading program is for anyone between birth and death, and that covers most of us. Most of us here in this room tonight. Anyways, Mission Possible, Spy a Good Book. Our official kickoff was May 31st. Thank you, Mayor White, for coming. We really appreciate that. And we have many prizes for reading up to 30 hours. I'd like to thank and acknowledge a few organizations who have contributed to this. Our friends of the public library, Miss Connie Elliott, thank you very much. Putt Putt Golf, Whataburger, Mount Asia, 7-Eleven, thank you very much for all of your contributions, donations to us. The reading program, as I said, is open to everyone. You come in and register. The first week we had approximately 300 people that registered, and I want to encourage everyone else to register. We have on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Pecan Park and at Buffalo Ridge Park programs. We have on Wednesdays our craft programs in the library, and on Fridays we have our special entertainers. Coming this Friday will be animals, so bring the kids. The kids always love the animals. Anyways, I've said enough. Please come into the library. Please register. We all want everyone to have a good time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, and hope this is a rousing success for you for the benefit of the kids and the others who are going to be reading in this summer reading program. Our second announcement tonight, Councilmember John Williams.
I apologize, Mayor, I can't talk that fast. First of all, I'd like to announce a concert in the park at 7:30 p.m. Be at the Haltom Road Park. It's Thursday, June the 19th. It says, "Come salsa dance with Kincajo." I'm going to go down just to see what a salsa dance is. So that's 7:30 Thursday, June the 19th at the Haltom Road Park. I also have an announcement to the Beautification Board and some volunteers, and they really don't ever get pointed out. So if I could have any Beautification Board members that are here tonight, could you stand up just for one moment, please? And volunteers as in Fran Burns and whatnot. Saturday, we did a pickup, litter pickup on Denton Highway. We started at Broadway and went to the Glenview intersection, picked up litter on both sides of the road. At that event, we had Bertie Blocker, Mary Spencer, David Harper, Betty Porter, Lisa Newsom, Don and Kenita Weldon. Those are all members of the beautification board. Also, Fran Burns was there to help out with us. And I just want to thank those volunteers for their dedication. Each month, they go up there one Saturday and pick the trash up. It's kind of disheartening to go up there and pick it up that morning, drive back by that afternoon and see stuff laying back out where you picked it up. But I know their heart's in the right place, and we appreciate your volunteerism and appreciate your consideration to Haltom City. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Before we do take a break, I want to ask our attorney, Mr. Olson, to take a look at the matter of the Visitor Citizens Forum and any resolutions or ordinances we have regarding that as it relates to the issue that came up with Mr. Eklund a moment ago. If there's anything in that ordinance that either allows or prohibits a person from filling out more than one of the speaker's cards, or if it's limited only to the to the speaker's cards they've presented, regardless of the number. Okay, and if you'll do that, we'll have that clarified by our next meeting. The time is about 25 after 8. Let's be back in at 25 minutes till 9, and we'll resume this council meeting. I'm going to ask you to introduce this item number 10 when you get there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our meeting at this point. We left off with the announcements and events portion. And in the earlier portion regarding the Visitor Citizens Forum, we had an unusual circumstance come up where someone had filled out more than one speaker's request card and wanted to speak on multiple subjects, and we kind of got into a question about what was proper and what was the intent of the ordinance or resolution that addressed that subject. And I had talked with Mr. Eklund, and I apologize to him and to all of you for any awkwardness at that point. This is just something we never had addressed before. But before we proceed, I want our attorney, if he will, to address the subject to see what we do, Mr. Olson, with these two other speaker request cards that Mr. Eklund had filled out.
Mayor, I think the decision's been made on that tonight. I will look at the visitor citizens policy that's been previously adopted by the council and make a determination on how I interpret that and whether or not multiple speaker cards can be filled out by people to talk about different topics. I don't recall off the top of my head what the limitations are in the policy. I can certainly understand that the policy could be abused if several speaker request cards were filled out for different topics, because I know that one of the original discussions by the council was to allow a reasonable period of time, but to put a specific time limit on speakers so that the matter wouldn't take several hours to address the public interest items. But I'll have to look at the policy and see whether or not it would be permissible, the way the policy is written, to allow a speaker to speak several times on several different topics, and I'll be glad to do that by your next council meeting.
Okay, and would you also, you and I had talked during the break, I'd ask you about could these two items that he wished to discuss or bring before the council, could that be addressed under the announcements events portion that we were involved with when we interrupted the meeting to take the break? And your comments on that?
Mayor, the announcements and events portion is a item for the council members to bring items to the public's attention and the council's attention, and those items need to be brought up by council members and not by citizens.
Okay. Just a point of clarity, we did have Ms. Smith from the library, who was not an elected official, make one of the announcements a moment ago on behalf of staff. Does that fall in line with the comment you just made?
That's correct.
Okay, so where we are with this is we will move forward in just a moment. Councilmember Williams has his light on. After he makes his comments, then we'll move on to item number 10 within the parameter of the comments that have been made by legal counsel. I do want to make a comment tonight that there's no one on this council, no one here at this table who feels more strongly about the First Amendment and the right of free speech, and we want to be sure our citizens have an opportunity to exercise that free speech. We do need to be sure it's within the bounds of whatever resolutions and ordinances the council may have placed, and it is within the bounds of order and decorum. So with that in mind, Councilmember Williams?
A question for the attorney. You said the announcement and events, that strictly goes probably what you said with the council and probably members of staff and employees and whatnot. How long will the mayor talk to Mr. Eklund about the items that he was going to bring up? One of them is a timely matter. If we don't discuss it tonight, it's kind of a moot point that we go on from there. And the second one is has to do with the mail service. So I don't know if that would, it's a changing in the mail service which will affect the citizens in Haltom City. And those were like, regular announcements. I guess I could have made those announcements for Mr. Eklund if I'd had them prior to the meeting. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. But the announcements events section of the agenda is a authorized council sponsored announcement or event.
Then we would be out of order to allow Mr. Eklund to speak at this time, if the council waived it, or does the council have the authority to waive it?
Any council member, if with the permission of the council, we can certainly reconvene the announcements and events section, and any council member who wants to bring that topic up has the right to do that.
I would probably, with the council members, they'd like to, Mr. Eklund, usually whatever he brings to us has interest to it. I can think back to the last 5 years, I can't think of really anything that he's brought to us that was ridiculous. So I'd like to open up a motion to allow him to go ahead and make that, and then possibly on our next agenda, put this on the deal to be discussed and put it a little bit more in concrete to where it'll be a little bit more understandable, if I could indulge on you for that, Mayor.
Okay. A question, and following up on what you have just said, Councilmember Williams, is a motion necessary? Councilmember Williams made this in the form of.
Could I make that a suggestion?
Mayor, no, we don't need to make it that difficult. We can simply continue the announcement and events section of the agenda, and then he can bring that topic.
With the approval of the rest of the council, though, I just want to take that upon myself.
Councilmember Avery?
Mayor, would it be appropriate to have Mr. Eklund speak in the announcements and events, or would it be more appropriate to reopen the visitors and citizens forum if we're going to do this?
Mr. Attorney, that's a question for you.
Either way.
Can you open it back up to visitors and citizens, do it this one next time and address it? Put the item on the...
Absolutely.
Well, I want to be fair to Mr. Eklund, but I also want to be fair to anybody else that may come before the... I don't want to be here 3 months down the road and say, well, you let Mr. Eklund do it. I want to get it clarified.
Okay. Well, Councilmember Williams, what I understood earlier was that the council was concerned about adhering to the policy on visitor citizens forum, And as was discussed, the probable intent of that policy was to allow 5 minutes per person. I will look at that and see if that's the case, but the council certainly can waive that in appropriate circumstances. I would always suggest that you be consistent in what you're going to do, and if we want to allow speakers to speak for more than 5 minutes, then you should be fair to anyone who wants to exercise that same right. But for tonight, if you want to waive that requirement, allow it to happen, let me review your policy, and then at the next meeting we can decide whether that policy needs to be amended or not. We can do that.
Being vague on this, I would like to go ahead and suggest that we let him go ahead and do that, and at the next council meeting we get it down, and that way we won't have to come up again, we'll know. And I'd like to know if the rest of the council members are, I guess by a show of light or something, see if they want to do it or don't want to do it, and we'll go on from there.
Councilmember Fowler, and then Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not a problem with Mr. Eklund speaking. I spoke to him briefly Saturday about this issue, and I would think that I would recommend, though, that we not allow it under the Visitors and Citizens Forum, since I believe, looking back, I was mayor at the time that we set this policy up and we set this program up, and the intent was to allow people to talk on one issue 5 minutes, and if we're filling out multiple visitors cards, I don't think that was the intent. Now, it may not state that, but I believe that intent was to prevent that from happening. What Mr. Eklund chooses to discuss, I think, would fall under, I don't have a problem allotting time for him to speak on something that would affect the rest of the city, such as mail service, no different than garbage service or anything else. So I just would hate to see us set a precedence and allow something to happen under Visitors Citizens Forum when I don't believe that was the intent of the policy to start with.
Councilmember Sutton.
Yes, I'd just like to know maybe a little bit more of the gist of what the subject is about before we make a decision to go into whether it's going to be in the Visitor Citizen Forum or whether it be attached to number 11. Is there a possibility we could find a little bit more about what the subject is about?
I think the quickest, Mr. Eklund and I talked about this just briefly during the break, and it will not fit in. It will not fit into that. Councilmember Fowler, did your light come back on?
I was going to explain, but you'd already mentioned it.
Okay. Here's what we're going to do. The city charter under section 3.10 says the mayor of the city of Haltom City shall preside over the meetings of the city council. It doesn't say how he is to proceed to do so. It's left solely to his discretion unless the council adopts rules of procedure that identifies that specifically. Based on that, we will tonight extend a point of privilege to Mr. Eklund to allow Mr. Eklund to come back up under the Citizens and Visitors Forum. And I need to ask the attorney, is that within my power to make that decision based on section 3.10?
Mayor, you're asking for an attorney answer, and my answer is if you do not have the power to breach an adopted policy that the council has created with regard to Citizens and Visitors Forum. I do not know what that policy says or what it allows in this regard. I will look at it and have an answer by the next meeting. But to the extent that the council wants to waive any application of that policy tonight, that can be done. Mayor, you are the presiding officer. In the absence of any rules that have been adopted by the council, then you do prevail in your decision on procedures of this meeting. The question is whether or not the council has taken specific action to adopt the policy, and they have in this regard. Whether or not this issue has been addressed, I can't answer tonight.
Okay, so the answer to my question is no, I can't do what I just said.
You cannot conflict with a city adopted policy. I do not know what that policy says. I don't have a copy of it.
Well, nobody wants to not violate a city policy more than I do. I have to depend on you to know what that city ordinance or policy is.
Well, I'll be glad to tell you. My suggestion would be that you not take that action tonight, because I cannot tell you that you would not be violating that.
Okay. In view of the advice from council, let me ask, can we go back and allow Mr. Eklund under the announcements and the citizens?
Yeah, yes, as I said before, if the council wants to allow that, that is permissible.
And for the council to allow that, do we need a motion by the council?
I would suggest that, yes.
Okay, I didn't know the way it was posted, if we could do that or not.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Fowler, and then Councilmember Williams. Folks, I want to apologize for all of this. We've got some real serious things to be talking about tonight. We've got bogged down in some procedure that is entirely unique. I never saw this before, and I've been doing this for years and on various levels, and I want to apologize for the awkwardness of the moment. Councilmember Fowler.
Councilmember Williams, would you like me to make a motion? Or?
I can second. I already made one, so you go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to ask my colleagues to allow Mr. Eklund to come back and speak under the announcements and events section for a period of 3 minutes to discuss the mail service, curbside mail service in Haltom City.
Okay, that's great. He had two different subjects that were still at issue. Is your request for only the one subject?
I'd like to allot then
3. I beg your pardon?
I'd like to allot 5 minutes then to discuss any and all issues be brought forth by Mr. Eklund then.
Okay, the attorney suggested this be done in form of a motion. Is that in
Yes,
form
sir.
of a motion?
That is in form of a motion.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Williams?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that motion, and I'd also like to address to have this put on the next agenda to be straightened out that time, and I hope that Mr. Eklund takes less than 5 minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on that motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote. And that passes unanimous. Mr. Eklund, 5 minutes to discuss both. If you will, again, give us your name and address for the record in this regard.
My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. This is going to be terribly anticlimactic after all that. First, I'd like to discuss briefly the rumor that I have from a very good source regarding the Postal Service attempting to move all the Haltom City boxes or large portions of them to the curb. I will initiate a whole different standard of delivery for our citizens, our senior citizens, safety issues, later delivery times possibly, numerous other issues that are faced with our neighboring cities. And I wanted to bring that before the council and the citizens tonight because rumor has it it's coming pretty quick. Now, how do we take care of that? We contact our postmaster at the big house in Fort Worth and let them know if we really want to have our box down the street, at the curb, or anywhere else. Okay? I'm going to do it. Okay? Second of all, I'd like to talk about the Tarrant Appraisal District. We all got our tax bills recently, on the city benefits from that and the rise in property values. However, from my research in my particular area, which is south of Belknap and east of Haltom Road, my area of concern, there was some typographical errors on the things that raised the property value on properties $30 a foot. They raised it from $38,000 to $72,000 in 1 year for a 1,000 square foot house. What does that mean to the citizens and to the city? What it means is they have a bad database. They're using that bad average in there, right, along with some other ones that we found, right, and it skews the issues. The appeals process is already closed for the citizens. Those of you that have appealed and are waiting to meet before the appraiser, my day's tomorrow, okay, or go before the whole committee, I would be happy to share this information with you from TAD. It's very important that TAD get good information so that the city can get good information and get good numbers. However, TAD has a problem. I would encourage all citizens to contact your county commissioners in regards to the actions of the Tarrant Appraisal District. The city really doesn't have any control over them. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your efforts, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. I do have one other matter. It looks like tonight is a night for unusual events to occur in a council meeting. I have just been handed a speaker's request form by the city secretary to speak on action item number 9. That was a part of the consent agenda. It should have been addressed at that time. I was not aware that Mr. Hack had requested to speak on that subject. Is it appropriate, Mr. Counselor, for me to ask Mr. Hack if he'd like to address this item, even though we have already taken action on that?
I think it would be appropriate.
Mr. Hack, would you like to address the council regarding if you would come forward at this time, please? And I do want to apologize. We've got all of this paper up here, and I accept responsibility for that, and I apologize to you regarding that. Your name, if you will give us your name and address.
My name's Ronnie Hack, and I live at 4714 Lorraine. And number 9 on the agenda is a monument for the new fire station. Gentlemen, I don't see how, with the way things are, the financial situation the city's in, we can afford to go and put a monument, even though everybody here, and I'm sure everybody in Haltom City appreciates the job the firemen do. I don't see how we can afford to go put a monument up there that's not really needed. I mean, if we put one up there for the fire department, why not the police department? They do just as good a job, and they're out there every day risking their life. Where's it going to end? We're going to be putting monuments up everywhere for people that we're spending money that we don't have. And that was the point I wanted to get across. We're going to spend some money that we don't really have for something that we don't really need. When we've got a new fire station, we've got the new recreation center, the new Public Works building. We've got things that we need. We don't need this right now. Maybe at a later date when the city's in a better financial situation, we can do something like that. And the other point was that if we're going to do it for these firemen, and everybody knows what a good job they did at 911, but everybody needs to remember too, there were a lot of police officers in those buildings. And a lot of those police officers come down and died trying to help those firemen and those people in those buildings. So what are we going to do for those folks? We need to do something for those if we're going to do it for the fire department. Like I said, right now we're not in a situation to do it for either one of them. So maybe at a later date we can bring this back up and we can do this. But I don't see the point in doing it now when we can't afford it. And I think those folks would agree. We can recognize them without putting a monument out there in front of their building. Thank you.
Mr. Hack, if you don't mind remaining there just a moment, this item was not under the Visitor Citizens Forum, which has the constraint that we're not able to engage you or discuss this issue. It may be some member of the council would like to make a comment or might ask you a further question. Do you mind remaining there for just a moment? Members of the council, any questions or comments for Mr. Hack regarding the issue he brought forth on action item number 9? I don't believe there are, but I wanted to give the members of the council an opportunity to respond in any way or to ask any questions for you. This issue of that you've brought up is issues that we've struggled with for sure in regard to this matter. Your points are well taken regarding the value of the police department as well as the fire department. Councilmember Sutton.
Right. Mr. Heck, I just wanted to ask if you might have been aware of the money, where that would be coming from if we were to do that monument, that it was coming from a bond fund and not the general fund. Were you aware of that?
What difference does that make? It's part of the city's money, right?
Good point. Good point. And that's a good point. That's a very good point. Right now, through the work of the staff, of the architect and the staff and everything else, they had bid a certain amount for this project, and they are quite a bit under on the project for as far as the cost. We just looked at some numbers here that showed that it looks like they're going to complete this project way under budget, to maybe an order of magnitude above that $20,000. And we struggled with, Is it something that is really necessary, or is it something that we should do? And it was a real hard discussion that each of us had, and I'm sure that each of us have been thinking about it and talking about it throughout the last few weeks about this. But the money does come from a bond fund that the citizens here of Haltom City voted for and approved for that fire station.
I didn't see, I saw the fire station approved. I didn't see anything about putting a monument up. Like I said, they approved for the fire station fine. I didn't see for the monument. And the other point, like I said, is if we're going to put one up for these firemen, our police officers are out there every day risking their lives, taking these criminals off the street, and I know because I'm one of them.
Yes, sir.
And they need just as
right.
much recognition. So that bond money was for the station itself. I don't see where it says anything about putting a monument up there for the firemen that's not really needed at that time, when there's other things I'm sure those firemen need, like a pay raise, like the rest of the employees in the city, like the police department. They need a pay raise. They don't need a monument, sir. They need a pay raise.
Yes,
you want
sir.
to show appreciation, give
Yes,
the people a pay raise. Don't build them a statue they can go out there and bow down to. Give them a pay raise.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hack. You realize that we couldn't take bond fund and put it into the general revenue.
Oh, I realize that.
Okay.
You get the point
Okay.
what I'm saying.
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you, sir.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams?
Thank you.
I grew up with Mr. Hack, so it's hard for me to call him Mr. Hack, but I'll do it anyway.
That's my dad.
Can't call you Ronnie. We discussed this in pre-council, and for the people out there that are listening in the audience and also via TV, what we're talking about is when we build our new fire station up on Broadway, there's going to be a monument made by a gentleman over in Fort Worth. The cost of the monument is going to be approximately $25,000. We have Warren Davenport with the Fire Service Board with us tonight, and the Fire Service Board is the one that presented this to us through their board that they have. And I think that they've, what did they say, City Mayor, 12.5 is what they're shooting for?
Or 10,000.
They're shooting for 10,000, I think they said. And I think Mr. Davenport said they already had 5,000 of that pledged, and they were shooting for 10,000. But I'm hoping, with the enthusiasm that board has and the way they react with fellow firemen and stuff, I would like to see it to where they could raise all their money themselves and none of this come out of that. I think we may, before the project's finished, I think we may see that happen. Like Councilmember Sutton said, it does come out of a bond package. No, it wasn't approved in the bond package, but we'll see some things in the construction of this building that weren't in the bond package, that weren't figured in, that will probably have cost overrun, and we'll have to go in and add stuff to it. I appreciate the job you do as a police officer. I appreciate all our police officers. I wish we could build a monument for everybody. But it's probably not going to happen. This is just something that this particular board, our crime prevention board, could have done the same thing for the fire department, for the police department when they opened the new PD over there. So I would hope that you'd have patience with us on it and hope that we can come up with the money without using any of the bond money.
That'd be nice, but like you said, there could be cost overrun on building that facility. That $25,000 for that statue could go toward that cost overrun rather than that statue out there and keep us out of a little bit of a bigger hole than we're already in now.
I agree with you. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hack. I don't see any other lights on. We appreciate your comments sincerely, and I again want to apologize to you for this speaker's request card not being in front of me at the time this item came up. I want to take a deep breath and move forward now to item number 10. Mr. Torres, would you like to introduce item number 10, please?
If I could, just kind of get everybody up to speed about why this item's on here and the nature of the issue. As most of you know, last year the city hosted a parade and picnic on 4th of July, and it was a pretty well attended event, and we budgeted about $3,500 last year and spent approximately that same amount. This year the city had budgeted $5,000 to hold such an event. The intention was that we would make it bigger and better and we were well on our way to doing that. There's a committee of staff members that have been working on this project for some time, but given the recent financial situation that we've been placed in, there's been a lot of discussion lately about whether or not the city should in fact go out and spend this money. Compounding that is the fact that this year the 4th of July is going to fall on a Friday, and there have been a large number of participation declines in the parade, and I think to date there are only 4 different groups that have agreed to participate in the parade, as well as the committee's been having some trouble finding food vendors to work at the picnic after the parade. There was a recommendation by this committee recently that in fact we ought to cancel this event based on not necessarily one of those issues but both of them in combination. And as we know, there have been a number of cities in our area that have canceled outdoor events that they've planned for this summer, primarily due to the declining revenues. So what we've done today is bring this item before the council so that the city council can ultimately make the decision as to whether or not we should proceed on or not. And there was some discussion earlier this evening about this item, and I think there might be a little more to take place right now. So if there's any questions, Bobby Arthur, who is our senior center director, coordinator, who's here, who actually chaired this committee, and she's here if there are any questions that may be posed.
Members of the council, anyone have a question for Ms. Arthur, so we know whether to bring her up here or not? Councilmember Fowler, did you have one?
I'd like to give Ms. Arthur an opportunity to come to the microphone, please.
Yes.
You do so well with our seniors, we thought we'd get you in front of our viewing audience.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Ms. Arthur, you had mentioned in pre-council that last year we had 49 some odd participants, or maybe a few more.
We had 49, 47 actually took place in the parade.
Okay, and out of those, y'all sent out some information and asked them about participating in this year's parade, and what
Right.
was your response on that?
We only had 6 confirmed this year.
And what was most of the reasoning for that?
Number one, being on a Friday, a lot of people just had made other commitments, being with their families away for the weekend.
For
But
long
we did
weekend.
have a lot of people over the financial matter express a concern about that.
And I know I'd asked you earlier in pre-council, I know that our volunteers and seniors and everyone that takes part in our community that do things such as the Stampede and the Halloween Carnival and the Christmas tree lighting and everything is always done very well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like with the lack of participation by some of these other people, do you feel like that we can do this successfully, or do you feel like that it has greatly hindered the ability to do it properly this year?
I really do. I think at this point, we've gone to a point where it's a point of no return. I don't think we can do it and do it successfully.
And Councilmember Williams had brought that up during pre-council, the fact that due to the late date of this, he has been instrumental in the last few years in participating and is representing the council and helping on the planning and production of this event. Am I speaking out of turn in the fact that you feel like that it's such a late date that it'd be difficult to do it properly? Now, I'd mentioned great concern about the fact of not having a function such as this, because last year having an opportunity to participate in it it went over very well. You had all the way from little tiny toddlers all the way to senior citizens participating, and great turnout along the parade route, and a lot of people participating in the event. And I hate to see us not do it, but then again, I hate for us to do something and not do it as well as we can.
Right.
And if I base that upon your, I have a great deal of respect for your judgment in that, and I feel like that, maybe that's a difficult decision for us to make to cancel something such as this, especially coming off a war and knowing that it's about our independence and it's about the birth of our country. But if we choose not to do this as a council, I would like to ask that we maybe consider transferring the funds that were set aside this to the park board to allow them to, if it's within reason, to allow them to maybe utilize on the Halloween carnival or some of the things in the fall, if it's within reason.
Any further, I'm sorry.
That's all I have.
Any further questions for Ms. Arthur? She was here to make this presentation. Councilmember Hurley?
I've got a question. I was told that we do have a band that's, Mr. Fowler said that was scheduled to come in.
At the park, yes.
And I agree with you that all of the reasons are good for not having it and not having it right. But how about if we had the band come into the park for a picnic, and if people want a picnic at Broadway Park with the band music,
Exactly, because
that'll be second best anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further?
No.
Councilmember Williams, and then when you're through, I'll entertain a motion regarding the 4th of July event.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Ms. Arthur, I want to thank you for all the work you do for our center and for this, and I want to thank the people that have served on this committee. I just found out tonight that most of the people on that committee were on it last year, and we all worked together. It is disappointing not to have it since the 4th of July. 2 years ago on our 50th anniversary celebration we had it, and it was a tremendous success, and the reason we had it the following year was because we got such good response off front, and the people wanted to continue to have it. Aggravated's not the word that I want to use. It's just, it's disappointing that something that we were going to make an annual deal has fell to the wayside. I know that we had this, I just announced this concert in the park. I think the mayor went to the last one, and maybe one of the two of the council members, and that's really not a very big participated in. I think there was probably maybe 60 or 70 members at that particular function. That included the band and their families and stuff. And I think the city manager said we spent about $3,500 on this last year, and I'm guessing we had 1,800, 2,000 people participate in it. And in view of the war and stuff, and wanting to bring the community together, I think I would have to agree with Councilmember Hurley. Maybe go ahead and have the band there. If people wanted to come down there, have a picnic, the band would be there. You know, I don't know what the cost of the band is. If any, I don't even want to know what the cost of the band is. But I would like maybe next year to suggest. Of course, I won't be on the council, so I won't have a word in it at all. So I would like to probably see a mixture next year of staff and volunteers to put this together. That way, give your volunteers that aren't working. I know after you work here all week, that to tax this on you to give you more to do is a lot to ask for you. So I'd like possibly next year to have the council consider having some outside volunteers. Maybe form a committee on it and have the 4th of July and have it chaired by an outside committee.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur. I'm in line for a motion regarding item number 10. Councilmember Hurley?
Mayor, I move that we cancel the scheduled 4th of July celebration event in favor of having a band in the park.
Councilmember Sutton?
That was for a second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second to cancel the 4th of July event and parade and picnic. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote. Item number 11 is to give consideration and or take action on the Haltom Pond located on Denton Highway at Cedar Crest Drive. Let me, in an attempt to prevent a situation similar to what we had a while ago, take just a moment and talk about procedure. I'm going to ask the city manager, since there has been some discussion on this matter in the last month or two, to bring us up to date. Following that, Councilmember Williams had asked this item to be placed on the agenda, and ask Councilmember Williams to take up where the city manager leaves off and introduce the subject further. and then tell us what his recommendation is regarding this. At that time, we will ask the two people who have filled out the speaker's request card on this subject to have an opportunity to speak. Following the two who have asked to speak on the subject, we will. I'll then entertain a motion regarding the matter of the Haltom Pond. So, with that procedure in mind, Mr. Torres.
There's a lot of history here, and certainly this issue in Haltom City goes back, predates me by many, many years. Over the past year that I've been here working for the city, there have been a number of discussions about the Haltom Pond, and I don't know where that name came from. It's a pond owned by the Haltom family on the corner of Cedar Crest and 377, so we just refer to it as the Haltom Pond. But there's been a lot of discussion for many years, apparently, about what the city could do to that eyesore to make it go away. And, of course, this time of year, typically some of the discussions focus on breeding of mosquitoes. The city does, in fact, last year and this year, has spread out larvicide in that immediate area to help minimize the impact of mosquitoes that may be breeding there. And, of course, we've done some fogging last year, and we'll do more this year as well. But I guess the real problem is, what about the pond? Is it the problems that it creates, and what can the city do to make it go away? I will tell you that I think this council is particularly focused on this issue and what we can do as a governmental entity to remedy the situation. And at the retreat that we had last February, the city council discussed this issue, and the decision was made that a small group, a small committee comprised of myself, one council member, and a couple of other staff members would meet with Mr. Haltom and try to work through some kind of solution. Mr. Haltom seemed very receptive, and I've gotten to know him, somewhat good over the last year or so. So our communication is pretty good. I'm not going to go into every minute detail of the discussions, but the bottom line was we were going to try to work with Mr. Haltom through a way of filling in the pond and making all the standing water go away. And that can only be accomplished if there's an underground water collection system put down the highway, and to collect a lot of that water that runs down the highway and then route it into our public storm sewer system. And I think the numbers that I've seen just recently for materials only to accomplish that project is about $150,000, utilizing city crews to actually do this. And we're not talking about constructing public storm sewer on private property. We're talking about doing it within the right-of-way or within an easement that would probably be obtained from Mr. Haltom. But there would take a large amount of clean fill dirt to be put in that pond and break the dam and remove the water, and it would take some months to accomplish. It wouldn't be a project that can be done very, very fast. But with everybody's agreement, and at the time we did receive quite a bit of cooperation from Mr. Haltom, we were going to work toward that over these upcoming summer months. Recently, the city had an opportunity to bring in quite a bit of clean fill at no cost to the city. With all the construction projects that we have going on, there's almost always amount of earth that's being excavated, and contractors are looking for places to dump. So it was just simply a matter of the city utilizing some of our contractors and directing some of that waste material to that area, and then Mr. Haltom would be responsible for leveling it out and clearing the underbrush and eventually making the pond go away. But again, we can't do that unless we come in behind this effort or simultaneously and construct underground sewer collection system. But we were working toward that. Recently, though, there was a good amount of dirt from one of our projects that had to be disposed of somewhere, and we made an attempt there to fill in the pond, and Mr. Haltom backed down on the deal. That's really what's led the item to be placed on the agenda tonight for some discussion to figure out where we're going to go from here. And Mr. Haltom's not here. I did call him on Friday, his office. Are you? Okay. Mr. Haltom's daughter is here. So, in all fairness, I believe that although she may not be the property owner, I think she's close enough to Mr. Haltom that she ought to deserve an opportunity to talk on the matter. We've done a little homework and provided the council some information about potential code violations of that pond, things that don't really focus on the pond itself, because I think technically having a stock pond, which is how that water originated in Haltom City, having a stock pond in Haltom City is not technically a violation. It's all the undergrowth and stuff that has come about in that immediate area that technically is the violation that I think we're going to take a look at. So I don't know where this discussion is going to go, but the idea being that I believe that the outcome of tonight is that the City Council is going to direct staff to proceed in some direction to remedy the problem. And I hope everyone can understand, and even the people at home can understand, that we're truly focused, truly disturbed by the situation out there. I know it's been talked about for a long time, but I really believe that this group is ready, willing, and able to push the issue to make it happen and make it go away, even to the extent that we were willing to help and partner on the deal. I did call Mr. Haltom on Friday and invited him. I only left a message. I didn't get him, so I'm pleased that someone's here that can potentially respond. But that's where we are. John Williams has asked that this item particularly be placed on here for discussion tonight, so that's the reason I'm about to turn it over to him, and I got several staff members here that may also have some contribution to the issue. So, Councilman Williams.
Thanks for that brief. First of all, I had asked the city secretary to contact the Haltoms and let them know that this was going to be on the agenda. Was that done, Ms. Staub?
Through me.
Through it, okay. But I had called and asked earlier this week, or earlier last week, to make sure that that was done, where the Haltoms would be aware that this was on there. On or about May 2nd, 1998, I was elected to this council. At that time, approximately a week later, I started getting the complaints about the property at the corner of Denton Highway and Cedar Crest. I'd always referred to it as the Haltom Mansion. Shortly after being elected, I started being addressed as the Haltom Swamp. I sort of took exception to it because I've been in Haltom City since 1954, and the Haltoms were there when I got there, and they had a beautiful place. So I kind of defended it a while. Mr. Haltom's a friend of mine, and I consider him a friend. But I got complaints ranging from tall grass, stagnated water, trash and debris, mosquitoes, and being an eyesore. Every year at election time, I'm asked, why don't you do something with the Haltom Swamp? I made several attempts to address the problem. At one time, there was an agreement almost made to put together to have the problem alleviated. Then politics came into play, and the council was accused of trying to spend tax dollars to work on private property. The so-called other side raised questions as to why we should use tax monies to fix private citizens' property. I've heard complaints from both sides, factions. Some make sense, some make no sense at all. Now here it is, 2003, 5 years later, and still no answer to the problem. At our so-called trip to the ranch, I asked a group comprised of Mr. Torrance, Mr. Muir, Council Representative Bob Hurley, to meet with Mr. Haltom and try to come with a solution. I understand there was an agreement that was made, and we were well on our way to correct the problem. This is a difficult time bringing this up when you bring something up against a friend. I'd contacted Ken Slovak, who was our General Services Administrator at the time, and this was a little over a year ago. He was able to get TxDOT to come out and remove some fallen trees that were in the right-of-way laying out in the middle of Denton Highway. They did a halfway job, in my opinion. Trees were come out, and they cut it 4 foot level, 4 foot heights, and left to come back as shrubs. I do not have a week goes by that someone doesn't go by and say, what are you going to do about the Haltom swamp? How can you keep doing that? I'm pushing the corner. The mayor was accused of making promises back in the 2001 election to fix the problem. The only promise I have made is address the problem. Now that what brings me to my actions tonight. James Cates, who owns Hardware Electric down on Carson Street, was forced to tear down a structure on Carson 7 or 8 months ago because it was ruled a health hazard and a breeding place for unwanted creatures. After he leveled the structure, then he began asking me every week, what are you going to do to correct the problem on Denton Highway? He did not refer to it as the Haltom Swamp. He just, what are you doing to correct that problem? West Nile mosquitoes are in the area, have been located in the area. I just read a report from our Public Works Department, said that we've trapped some mosquitoes in Haltom City, and fortunately none at this time have been traced to the West Nile. There's also some traps placed up around the Haltom property, and the results aren't back on those at this time. This property doesn't bother me. I only casually know Miss Haltom, Miss Mary Haltom there. I've met her once or twice through Mr. Haltom. I drive down the Denton Highway, and I try not to let things bother me like that. You know, some people just get this under their skin and just won't let up. There is water standing stagnant and has nowhere to run off. There is tall grass, much higher than the code allows. There's litter. Just this last Saturday, the Beautification Board and us bagged up 2 55-gallon bags of litter off that one property alone. Now, I understand that that property does not generate litter. Mr. Haltom is not putting litter in that property. It's coming off the Denton Highway. When I was very young, we used to sneak down to the Mr. Haltom's property and go swimming because we didn't have the 50 cents to go swimming at Barbrook. It was a dream for a boy that could not afford the money. It's cool, clear water, no trash, and no traffic. I understand this pond does not make its own trash, but our litterers do. Agreements are being made to allow each party to benefit in some way or another. I hate to take the action I'm having to take tonight, but I want the problem solved before I leave office. I have no motives for doing this. I'm termed out. I can't run for re-election, so I'm not trying to do this as a political move. I have some options. One of them is to have the caretakers of property to clean, dredge, shape the pond in question, and keep it maintained in the future. Put an aerator in it to keep the water moving. If you look at the property when you go by, the property is fairly flat. It's got some nice trees over on the east side of the property in front of the mansion. So there's really no water coming from, in my opinion, coming from the Haltom estate going into the pond. So that tells me the water is coming either from Denton Highway, from the service road running just to the north of the pond, or coming from the housing addition over behind the former Winn-Dixie store, coming through an underground drain, going up into the pond, and then unable to escape on downstream. Second choice would be remove the dam holding the water back and let the water go downstream. This would include filling the pond with fill dirt, topsoil, and keeping the grass mowed and maintaining the property in healthy conditions. I've been running this through my mind for 5 years. And if I don't step forward tonight and do something, 5 years from tonight, someone will be asking the same question. What are you going to do about the swamp? So I have an offer. Can the swamp be cleaned, shaped, or would you rather alleviate the problem and drain it? If it's going to be drained, I suggest it be done within 10 days or less. If cleaning and shaping is the answer to the work, I suggest it be started in 10 days. I talked to the city attorney about this, and briefly, I talked to Mr. Pliska with code. Mr. Pliska was kind enough to bring me a code violation. And I'm not real sure. I think I counted 15 or 16 codes in this deal, and this property only violates 7 of those out of the 16. I don't blame Mr. Haltom for the problem that's there. I don't know who put it. You know, some people say it's his fault. Some people say it's our fault. my opinion, I think it's the State Highway Department, the way the drainage is made. The people who talked a while ago, I can briefly get in on that now, on the Haley Street, talking about their bar ditches. It's 2003, it's not 1950. We don't build streets and put bar ditches. And we've got a place on Denton Highway, all the way from 820 down to nearly where it runs into Belknap, that's just bar ditch after bar ditch after bar ditch. And if we're talking about raising the bar, we're talking about a clean sweep, and whoever the problem is here, we need to get on it. It doesn't need to be, I've got a deal here from June the 23rd of 01. Mr. Mayor, you were newly elected at that time for your first term, and one of the things that you said, very strong language that day, I want this problem taken care of. At the ranch, we got a deal. Each council member came up with different things, and I brought up, I think I referred to it as the Haltom property. It's wrote in here a solution to clean up the body of the swamp at Haltom Road and improve the 28th Street cemeteries at Beach. Sometime last year, there was about $16,000 spent on the cemeteries on Beach Street, putting in some landscaping the length of 28th Street. We did that. We still haven't done anything. And I guess my question is, if this property, Mr. Mayor, I own a business on Northeast 28th Street that's a car lot, and usually a lot of people lean those as a not a very nice business. If this was sitting in front of my car lot 5 years ago, where would it be today? Would y'all allow me to do that? If it was in front of my house on Biscayne, would you allow me to have that like that? And it's nothing vicious against the Haltoms. It's a beautiful home. If anybody's been by there, the trees and everything, it's just that one little corner of it is not very pleasing. It's somebody's fault. We don't know whose fault it is. I don't know whose fault. Ms. Haltom will speak probably in a moment on it. But I'm for draining it, cleaning it, or condemning it. I don't care which of the three it does, but it needs to be addressed, it needs to be taken care of, and it needs to be taken care of now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. We need to get busy on it. We don't need to write tickets. That was a suggestion, write tickets. You know, you can fine them $2,000 a day. I don't want to fine them $2,000 a day. I just want to fix the problem. I'm open to council's suggestions on it, but I think I've gave 3 pretty good suggestions on what to do with the property. And I think also the city's engineer or someone should move forward vigorously with the State Highway Department and find out that one piece of property there. Everybody else has a bar ditch all down Denton Highway. That bar ditch is not maintained. Those trees were cut down in a terrible manner. They were butchered. And we need to get on top of it. We need to quit turning our head to it, and we need to take care of it tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Councilmember Fowler has his light on. Councilmember Fowler, when you stepped out a moment ago, I talked about the procedure that we would follow following Councilmember Williams to allow the people who filled out the request to address the council cards would be allowed to speak next. Do you have a particular question for Councilmember Williams, something he said?
No, sir, they can speak. That was fine. I was just going to.
Okay.
I didn't know how many were there to speak.
Okay, there are 2, but help me remember that you have, when that is finished, and also Ms. Mary, I believe it's Lancaster, I'd like to give you an opportunity following these 2 individuals if you'd like to address the council and answer any questions as Mr. Haltom's daughter. The first of these is Ms. Gloria Lyric. Ms. Lyric, if you will come forward and give us your name, and I may have mispronounced that, but give us your name and address for the record, please.
I don't know if I can reach this. Thank you. My name is Gloria Lurk. I moved here 2.5 years ago from Plano. And the first thing I noticed was the Haltom Pond. I mean, I get all these beautification things, you know. in the mail, and don't let your garbage out here, and don't do this, and don't let your grass get too high. And then this item on Denton Highway, it's shameful. And it's not only an eyesore, it's a health risk. It's a health risk to the children. And I don't care, West Nile virus is one thing, but there's a lot of other germs and bacteria in that pond. And I can't believe it. I mean, I see all these beautiful parks. You put on such a lovely presentation. And then you have that mess. I can't believe it. I mean, it's just completely unbelievable. It's been a thorn in my side since I've moved here. And everybody who went out for re-election, they heard my thoughts on it, and I talked to you too, Mr. Torres, on the phone. But, I mean, beautify Haltom City. Take all the money and put it down the road where the people are going to get off, 820. Put all those beautiful bushes out there, make it real pretty. That's such a waste when you have that. I don't understand it. I mean, our health is more important. Eyesores, yes, they're bad, but it's nothing compared to people's health. And if one person dies or has a problem from that pond, then we should all be ashamed of ourselves. I'm sorry, this is a real sore spot with me. Because my husband, if he catches anything, he's right on the brink of losing his life. So that's all I want to say. I thank you for
Ms.
listening
Lurick,
to me.
I believe you live, 2 blocks?
Yes, I walk my dog up from Bonnie Wayne up there every day. You have 2 storm drains. You have one at Ammons. They cleaned those out just this past week. You have one right there at Diamond Oaks. They cleaned that out. But this is right beyond there. And the poor people who are trying to sell their house on Diamond Oaks, I don't know how they'll ever sell it. The Haltom Pond backs right up to the houses. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Members of the council, any questions or comments for Ms. Lurick? Thank you, Ms. Lurick. For your comments, Ray Eklund, if you would come forward at this time. Are you trying to make up for a while ago? Thank you, Mr. Eklund. I do appreciate. We appreciate you here a whole lot. Okay, Ms. Lancaster, would you like to address the council at this time? If you will, go ahead and come on up. As you're coming up, give us your name and address for the record, and I believe you are Mr. and Ms. Haltom's daughter.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mary Haltom Lancaster, and I'm now living on the property. There's 2 houses there, one in the back, one in the front. We're in the one on the front. And for the record, I guess I moved there when it was 1954, and so I've been there a long time and pretty familiar with it. I agree, it looks bad. And I've told my dad, I said, you shouldn't have let it go this long. But he had, over the years, talked to the highway department, talked to the city. Each one says it's the other one's responsibility for that water on the property. When I was small, the pond was dry during the summer. Stayed dry for a long time. Got the tractor in there, cleaned out the pond, mowed, took care of it. Can't do that when it never goes dry. I'm here to tell you, I've walked the property. I've been down there, and I welcome anybody to come walk it. It's wet. It stays wet. It never goes dry. I've gone down there during the rain. I've taken pictures of how much water comes under that highway and how much water comes down the highway. It's ridiculous. That property across the street was not paved when we moved out there. It was ranch land. All that paved property, all that water drains to our property. We don't manufacture that water. There's no spring there. It comes from across the street of the highway and down the highway. And we'd like to get that water off of us too. And we appreciate your help in that because it's a mess. But that's really not why I'm here tonight. I do want to say, as far as the dirt thing, the man who was going to bring the dirt called my dad. And he said, look, this is not the right way to take care of this problem. He said, if we go in there and we knock down trees and we just start throwing dirt in there, he said, you're going to have a big mess. Now, this is the man who you talked to that was doing the dirt on the highway. And he said, if you don't grind up the trees, he said, when you go to put utilities or whatever in that property, he said, it's going to be a problem. He said, it needs to be done as a contract where one person goes in, they take the trees down, they grind them up, they fill in with dirt, and he said, it needs to be professionally done. You can't piecemeal this out. He said, you've got to have someone who knows what they're doing. And that's why he said, no, we can't do it, because this man told him, he said, you don't want to do that. And that's, you know, I don't know the man's name.
I do agree with the issue of the trees. It was never my or any staff member's suggestion that the trees be pushed into the hole.
Well, that's what the...
If it was my property, I would have the trees pushed up into a pile and either ground or hauled away and by some means.
Well, I think
not placed in there, but the
yeah.
clean fill then placed into
I think the problem is you got to move the trees before you put the fill dirt. And he wanted, supposedly it was supposed to be done in 1 day's time. And then he called my dad and said, look, he said, I can't wait on this project. He said, I got to get rid of this dirt.
Well, the dirt was only 500 yards is what it was exactly. By no means was that enough to fill in the pond. It was
I
just
just
a step.
Exactly. All I'm saying is you said something about my dad backing down, and that's not really the case.
Well, the
he wants to do it, believe me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I can direct the dirt to the hole, but
we got to have the drainage taken care of.
You have to have a dozer on the private property to either push the debris, the brush and debris off, and or level out the dirt. And the city cannot do that part of it. It's going to be an expense that will be on
But what I'm
your
saying is the dirt coming before. Here's the problem. It's so wet in there.
And that's part of the other thing.
You know,
I
there's
think
no
the
way
first
to
thing that needs to be done
get rid of the water
is break the dam, release the water.
Well, they've done that twice, and now it's come back twice. And
But
so,
it
you know,
needs to be
I
broken
don't
today. I mean, that's
Wait,
the only way
are
to
you
get
going
the
to come do
water
it once a week? Because I mean, that's it.
Well, again, that wouldn't be the city because that would involve putting a piece of equipment on private property.
Well, they've
We
done
don't
it
do
twice.
that. We're not doing it.
Well, I
this
don't.
time.
I
I'm pretty
understand,
sure, so-
but I was down there when they did it, so I can tell you they've already done it twice.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think the city can help and partner on this thing, but there's gonna be some expense on y'all's part.
The land part is not an issue. It's the water. That's the problem. We can't do a thing about the water. If there's nothing done about the water, we can't fix the land.
I agree. I mean, but it's gonna.
Well, the water comes from under the highway, and it comes straight to our property.
Well,
and down the highway.
And we have been proceeding toward taking that water as it comes down the highway from the north and as it crosses the highway from the west to gather it in large boxes, concrete boxes, and take it and run it down. And we have a plan for doing that. And like I mentioned earlier, the materials
that's what it's gonna
alone
take.
are going to cost probably somewhere close to $150,000, and that's with the city doing the work. If we contracted the whole thing out, it'd probably cost around $300,000. So the city was willing, and probably still is, willing
To get the water off.
to do that part.
Well, that's good.
Of the work that would be done in the right of way, and it was going to require an easement.
And I know he's all for that.
Yeah, but again,
then we can get the property cleaned up.
I actually we have to do them simultaneously. You can't wait on us to do the underground work because we can't do the underground work with the water there. The water has to go away,
Well, then-
and part
okay.
of it be filled in
Then
before
I
we
think-
could even have our equipment in there to do.
I think that that's a doable deal as far as taking the dam down. You've done it twice. We can take it down. But unless there's a permanent correction, taking the dam down is not fixing the problem. That's what I'm saying. We've done it twice. It's right back where it was.
Sure, that's not the answer, but draining it is, and the only way you're going to drain it is to
Well, the only way
take part of the dam down.
that will work is if the water stops coming back and filling it up. See, if we drain it, that water comes right back on there.
I understand. I mean, we're sitting here without drawings.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a plan to do that. It's a very simple plan, but it requires heavy equipment on private property, and that's where the city cannot do it, I mean, unless this council directed us to, and I doubt that's going to happen, but
Well, I know they've been on there twice, and I don't want just. And I told my dad, I said, this is not doing good. Just having them come break that dam every now and then. So I'm with you, and I'm with these people. I think if we could get the water off the property, then we can fill the pond, and mow it.
Sure.
But it's impossible to do that with that much water coming on there. And believe me, we're not bringing the water. It was at one time in its history a dry pond every summer. It's not been that way in a long time. Anyway, that's really not why I was here today. That's from my father because he's not here. My question is I, with my brother, own property on the Denton Highway, and I'm not real sure why, like, I guess items 6 and 7 have been moved to this 11 discussion. I just don't understand that.
It was moved to the 11 discussion just as a convenience within an
But I mean,
overall
I don't
context.
understand the connection. That's what I don't understand.
Members of the council?
I think they're going to be acted on separately. Is there connection or not? I don't know, but they'll be acted on.
Well, it was said that they were going to be discussed together. I just don't get any connection. That's all I'm saying.
They will not be discussed together. We'll take action on item number 11. When we're through with that, we'll take action on item number 6. When we're through with that, we'll take action on item number 7. We will not take action on all of them together.
Okay, it was just said earlier in the meeting that they were going to be discussed with 11. I just didn't get the connection.
Okay.
Okay. But that's all I have to say on that. And my dad is very willing to work it out. And, I don't want it to sound like he's not, because he is. We've certainly talked about it. If we can get that water off, that'd be great.
I guess
Okay.
I was.
Please go ahead.
I was just a little frustrated because I'd made arrangements to have that first amount of dirt brought in, 500 yards, which would have been a step, but I could not do it unless we had a dozer there to clear out some of the brush.
In all fairness, he only had 1 day's notice to get the dozer there.
I understand, but the contractor was offering to bring his dozer and do the
Well,
work.
I guess
I
the contractor was going to, well, this is the same contractor that told him he didn't think it ought to be done that way.
I met with him myself. I'm confident.
Well, perhaps he said something different when you weren't around.
Well,
But at any
know
rate,
what I heard.
if we can get a dozer there, if you can, I understood you were going to make a little drive-through where you could get there and put the dirt.
Again, a part on the part of the city, we offered to place a culvert there in the bar ditch of the
And
highway.
I know that hadn't been done.
Because obviously, because we weren't going to do. I mean, the guy was turned away.
But wasn't that going to need to be done before the guy came?
We were set to do it that afternoon, and we had approval from TxDOT to be able to do that.
Well, I think if we could just get more than 1 day's notice, I think we can work through this. I really do.
I understand, and the pipes are going to have to be set before we can proceed and get dirt filling in from the north, working our way back to the south.
And I think
It
that will
has to
take
be
care of the
done.
problem.
But I just need some assurance that, before we go and spend some money and help facilitate this, that in fact there'll be a dozer on private property clearing and pushing as will be needed as that dirt comes in.
We just need to work a little bit more coordinated than 1 day.
1 day doesn't work for me either.
Okay.
But opportunities fall in your lap.
I
and
understand,
you have
and
to
you
run
had a
with it.
golden opportunity,
Sure,
and there'll be
sure,
more. There'll
sure.
be more.
There will be.
Ms. Lancaster, please wait for just a moment. We had 3 lights come on a moment ago. Councilmember Fowler, Councilmember Williams, Councilmember Henderson had yours on. Do you have any questions for Ms. Lancaster?
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes, sir. I have the floor, yes, and the others also. Were you going to ask the others, or do I have the floor?
You have the floor now. When you're finished, then Councilmember Williams, and when he's through, Councilmember Henderson's turned his light off. Okay.
Okay. Ms. Lancaster, real quick, you said you moved there when you were a small child, and I'll also defer to Councilmember Williams. I'm going to ask former Councilmember Blocker if he's still here. And maybe former Councilmember Davenport, if he's still here. You said that, and council members had referred to earlier in his youth when he swam there when he was a child, it was clean at that time, correct?
It was clean at that time, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm
On-
thinking you might have been swimming in that other pond, though.
Owner. Okay, owner, and
right.
and
You
understand
must
that the
have been
rest of
sneaking in
y'all's
midnight.
property has always been kept very well, and I'm not aware of any code violations that have ever taken place on any other part of the property other than that
No.
area. Owner, about when did they reconstruct Denton Highway?
You know, my dad could tell you better than me, but I know I've got some
Ballpark.
letters that he wrote. I think it was like in the 70s. And I know that we sent a letter to the highway department, and their response is, hey, it's always been there, it can stay there.
Okay, and then
That's been their response.
I appreciate your candidness on that, because to give the people that are here a little bit of history on this project, back when Councilmember Blocker and I were on the council years ago, when I first went on, we had discussion about this property and about the eyesores and and what can we do. At that time, we'd asked Representative Carter at one point, and I know I had a personal conversation with him about Denton Highway. Why do we have bar ditches in Haltom City, and you go north of 820 to Watauga and the other cities, and they don't have bar ditches? You know, why should we be second-class citizens and have it,
And that's
put
not
in our
even a good bar
community?
ditch.
No, and I agree 100%.
There's
You
no
know,
concrete, there's nothing.
And so I can relate and understand to y'all's problem. We, as the business that I'm in development, we aren't allowed to drain water on someone else and just pour water on someone else's property. You have to divert it properly. Well, the state of Texas, when we went to Mr. Carter, it was going to get taken care of. We'll look into it, so on and so forth. I wasn't around when Ms. Truitt was elected and was our representative for this area for a short period of time until they did redistricting. Now it's Mr. Griggs. But I'll be real honest with you. That's the state of Texas, and some of the drainage problems that we've had have created this problem.
Well, I wrote
Now-
a letter to the state of Texas last year, and their response to me was, sorry.
I understand, and that's the same response we've had the whole time, and yet, I guess this is for staff. Who owns the right-of-way along that? Is it the state right-of-way?
The state of Texas.
It's a highway department.
Why is it not, then my question, why is it our responsibility as citizens of Haltom City to pay for drainage that's on state right-of-way?
They're telling us, this is what they told us, or my dad, that because the city drained the water there, it's not their responsibility.
Now,
I have a hard time believing that.
How did the city drain the water when it's state right-of-way that it's water that comes down the bar ditches?
It comes also, I guess, from Stanley Keller.
Okay. and
So I guess that's what they're standing on.
Question for staff, do we drain, I guess the engineer, Greg, not to put him on the spot, but do we drain water from Stanley Keller or from commercial property onto the Haltom
I
property?
think that parking lot across the way probably drains that way.
Mr. Van Noon used to be the expert on that. You don't mind me defer to him?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. We've got an underground drainage system almost all the way up to O.H. Stowe Elementary, and it picks up water through a huge drainage system in the parking lot of the old Winn-Dixie, the antique mall, that picks up all the drainage from what used to be unpaved that's now paved. So all the debris that's on it gets washed in that drainage system, goes underneath Denton Highway into the stock tank. And I think that's what happened. I think this is the stock tank for the Haltom estate. And when it was built, this was a pretty rural area. Stock tanks are pretty common. I mean, it seems to be everybody's dream in Fort Worth once they retire to go retire in Parker County on 4 to 6 acres, and the first thing they do is build stock tanks. Build stock tanks before they even build their home. But that's what this was for the Haltom property, as near as I can tell. And then over time, when development occurred around it, it was just naturally, the new developments didn't have stock tanks. It was a pond. The drainage was directed there, and over time, this is what you have. So I hope that answers the question.
That does answer my question. I guess, in my opinion, we have two options here. We can either beautify that and use it as a holding detention area and drain the water. Is that an option, Greg?
Certainly. I think the solution that we briefly discussed with Mr. Haltom and had a tentative agreement to is we're looking at putting culverts from where it goes underneath Denton Highway And just taking culverts right from huge reinforced concrete boxes is actually what they are. Parallel Denton Highway down to Cedar Crest. You have to angle at the intersection at Cedar Crest in order to preserve the gates around the driveway entrance. And then to go down Cedar Crest, and it drains right behind the Cornerstone Apartments. The materials alone were somewhere in the neighborhood of $115,000, and we don't have any equipment that'll lift the boxes of this nature. And so I think that's what brought up the estimate to somewhere around $150,000. The last wild card in this whole thing was because now it's been in somewhat of a natural state for
a long time.
50 years. If you built it in 1954, it's just about 50 years. So we have to get the Corps involved, and we would have to convince them that this is not natural. You know, it's obviously a man-made stock tank, but being that it's been there for such a long period of time, they may not take that view.
Therefore, would they ask that that be used as a retention area, detention area?
Well, they may allow us to drain it, but let's say it's 3 acres. They may require us to dedicate 4 times that amount. That's typically their formula. When you disturb 3 acres of natural, or how many extra acres you disturb, you've got to replace that amount fourfold somewhere else. And that's what we're doing on Little Fossil Creek with the improvements with the Corps there.
That's not a major obstacle, though, if it comes to that.
Sounds like it.
Further questions, Council Member Fowler?
Yes, sir. I still have quite a bit, I guess. So I look at it as only having the 2 options, either digging the thing out, making it a detention area and beautifying it, cleaning it up, or filling it in, which you're telling me if you fill it in, it's going to be a deal with the Corps of Engineers, which I know Legend Point development took a year to get through just the Corps of Engineers, just through FEMA. It was 1 year of paperwork.
Well, and it very well could take that long. It could take 6 months. It depends on what the construction activity is at the time. If you remember with Legend Point, that's when quite a few developments were occurring, so I'm sure that the workload that FEMA had and the engineers they hired to review their plans, was fairly hefty. Right now, with the economy in a tailspin, I don't think it would take a year, but it's going to put a kink in the time period, yes.
Okay, so regardless, though, in that, in answering my question, I view this as partially the Haltom's responsibility, pretty much a third, and a third. It's the state of Texas' responsibility also, because they built that highway, and I know that trash gets thrown out of the cars into the bar ditches, and it carries right down to that channel, because I can remember when I was younger, it was never that unsightly.
I'm not saying this is right, but I've seen plans for Belknap Street when it was reconstructed, and I have no idea how long ago that was. And the state just intermittently, when there was a low spot, there was a culvert underneath Belknap, and it's on their plans, and there's neither easement on the upstream side or the downstream side. I think that was just acceptable design criteria back when Belknap Street was reconstructed. I think, drainage wasn't a concern in 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s that it's been in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So because of the onslaught of development, drainage is much more of a critical issue than it was just 20 years ago.
Okay. Well, I would highly recommend that regardless of the outcome of this, whatever path we choose, I know that we've been on this issue with the state of Texas for, 10 or 12 years, and ask every state representative to help, and they've done nothing, absolutely nothing. I would highly recommend that we use a campaign similar to the process that was used up on the railroad crossings at McLean and Haltom Road, whether it be calling these state representatives, putting their phone numbers on Haltom City TV and publicizing it and asking the citizens to call in and ask them to participate in it, because I would like to see them eliminate all the bar ditches along Denton Highway. That's a mess in itself, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And it's contributed to a portion of this problem. That's all I have right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, members of the council, Councilmember Williams has his light on to speak next. It's very obvious that this is a very complex subject and may need further discussion before any action is taken. I have no idea, but we do need to try to bring this to some conclusion tonight. Whether it's to take a specific course of action, to allow another couple of weeks to work out some of the things that Ms. Lancaster has raised, whatever. But after Councilmember Williams speaks on this subject, I'm going to ask the council to take action one way or the other. So I'll be in line for motion after Councilmember Williams speaks.
Thank you. Ms. Lancaster? You want to sit down and rest a few minutes? There's a chair here.
I'm fine.
I appreciate you showing up to speak on this. I get information third hand, so I don't always get it exactly how it came out. My information is that we were have some dirt moved to your estate. My understanding, the dirt was going to be dumped to where we could use it when we got ready for it. I didn't know it was going to be a one day. Of course, I didn't have, when we made the committee to go talk to your father, I didn't know what the time restraints were. I didn't know that, 1 day, 3 days. I know you can't do dirt work in 3 days. Mr. Jimmy up there on the front row, he's been running all this through his mind while he's sitting there. We know it can't be done in a day. We know we can't drain it in a day, and we know we can't chip all the trees out in a day. If we drained it today, we couldn't do the chipping tomorrow. I'll get with you in just a minute, Jimmy. But they'll, it's going to have to dry out when we do drain it before we can do anything with the trees. I haven't been back in the back of the gates that much to know how much room. I don't know if there's room to stockpile dirt back there.
You'd probably have to stockpile it at the north end, right behind those houses,
Okay.
and work towards the gate.
Would we be able to get trucks in there? Are there any
You'd have to come from
lateral
the
lines or
highway.
anything? Come in through the highway?
Like if you turn right off the highway there, I think you could, sure. There's nothing there except trees,
Now, you talking about turning off Denton Highway on the north end of the property?
Mm-hmm. That'd be the best way to get
Is
in.
it dry there?
Probably not,
Okay.
but you might put some dirt and then come push it that way.
Me and the city engineer got into a disagreement one time. My car lot philosophy and his engineering don't go together, but I do know water runs downhill. I do know that if we drain this, and whoever drains it is going to have to be drained and kept drained. Am I understanding that y'all probably want to drain it and fill it in
Be great.
as opposed to having, would you
We
rather?
don't care, whatever, one way or the other, it's just a mess.
Well, it's your property, so I care about how you want your property. If you want the pond there.
I know that originally my dad probably liked having that little pond there.
Right.
I've been talking to him about it, and I told him, I said, if they can get the water off, then what's the point of having the pond? We don't need it.
Well, I
Or
love the pond.
We could have it. We could have the pond and make it pretty. We could do that.
When I was 12, I loved the pond. I'm 54 now, and I was down there crawling around in Saturday,
Now, I
and I
gotta
didn't
tell
love
you,
it.
I stepped on a water moccasin down there when I was 8 years old, so you better be careful down that
Well,
pond.
Saturday, there was a turtle this big around laying eggs down there by the third pole from the north end of the guardrail. So you got baby turtles on the way. But I think
you may have, what he had said earlier is that whole natural state thing. It was not like that in not too many distant years. It was a pond, it had a little pier, very tiny one, had a little tiny boat on it. So I don't really feel like the natural state issue should be an issue.
I've talked with your dad about this on numerous occasions, and I still agree that I'm in full agreement that the highway department's threw the water on you. We're the only city that I know of in northeast Tarrant County that has a service road that's a quarter of a mile long. The property just in front of the church there, just to the north of your home. Water comes down that. I know your new neighbor there on the corner has done some dirt work there.
A lot of work.
I noticed that he's getting the water away from his house, going down to what should be a bar ditch. Immediately and after you go past Mr. Johnson, I think Johnson's his name. Once you go there, you go from a bar ditch to a flat plain. They haven't maintained it. I'm ashamed that we had the trees cut off the front in the right-of-way there in the way that they were cut. It was a shoddy job. They cut them at 4 foot. You know how they look. They cut them and they're all bushed out now. Somehow that pond is extending over to the highway now, all the way to the guardrail.
I think that's because there's been lots of debris that washes in.
Right.
I don't know if it comes under the highway or maybe it's just from all the trees that are there, and it just keeps rebuilding a sort of a natural dam.
I'm not understanding how the water gets under the highway back up into the pond.
Oh, there's a great big huge concrete duct that goes under the highway, and all that water from that side comes to our side. And if there's any way, I mean, I've thought about this, if there was any way to block the water from coming under the highway. Of course, there was always, even when it was a little narrow highway, there was always a duct. The highway department insists they never made that thing any bigger, but I kind of think they did. If there was any way to block the water on the other side, that would probably alleviate the problem. I don't think as much comes down the bar ditch as comes from under the highway.
My suggestion, if it was my property, I would build up the front of it 3 to 4 foot. You know, along that deal, I would drain the dam. That way I would know there was no water coming from Denton Highway into that. Then
Well-
if that thing continues to flood, there's no water running off your property over to it.
Well, here's kind of the problem with that. That is, according to the highway department, the drainage thing.
Right.
And if we disrupt the drainage anywhere that water goes, then we're liable.
Can we,
I mean, that's just what they
it's
told
legal to
us.
drain water over into their pond?
They're saying because it's always been there. And it was always the natural drainage, whatever. See, it goes down into that little creek area back there, behind the apartments.
Well, we could talk about this for another
I know.
5 years, and it's, I would like to, when the mayor's ready for a motion, I'd like to make a motion that we drain the pond in some way, form or fashion, and try to find out where the water is coming from, try to get it dry enough that we can get the trees out, and
I think if we could find out where the water's come from, that'd be a good start, because we would get some responsibility.
I would like to them refer that as the Haltom estate as opposed to the Haltom
Ms.
swamp.
Lakers, I'm sorry.
And I apologize for referring to it as that, but that's what I keep
Well, it
getting.
kind of looks like it right now.
Yeah. So I want you to understand, it's nothing personal against me, against the Haltoms. It's just that I think we've sat on it long enough.
I agree.
You get up, you leave every morning, you see it. I go to work every day, I see it. It doesn't bother me. I don't know if it bothers you or not.
No, it does. That's why I wrote a letter to the highway department last year, you know, because that was the only thing I knew to do.
I think Mr. Fowler has an excellent idea about, we did this with the railroad, and we got good response. We put a phone number out there for somebody to call, and after about 24 hours, we had them on their knees begging, pleading to take the sign down.
Gentlemen, we're belaboring this point, and I think...
Mr. Van New has a, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Van New has something to add.
A thought had occurred to me, just talked with Mr. Fain. The county is always from time to time offering to help us out, but they can't help us out with materials, only with equipment and labor. A thought occurred to me, maybe we should perhaps research if they have wood chippers and that type of equipment, and maybe at no cost to Haltom City, we could start getting some of those trees out of there. That would be the first step before we start filling in that area. So.
Okay, I think we've labored this point, and we've got to a point where we're repeating, or we're trying to solve things that's probably not within the scope of the council to solve tonight. Councilmember Hurley?
Mayor, I've seen that place up there, and I agree. It's got a solution, but it's going to be a long-term solution, like Mr. Sawyers was talking about. And I move that we pursue this thing with a letter of agreement between the city and the Haltom Estate to put our equipment and personnel on there to effect the change of breaking the dam. This could be over a long period of time, depending on the timetable. But I move that we pursue it from this manner because it's the only one I see that makes sense.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Councilmember Fowler, your light was on. Is that for a second, or did you have?
I'd like to second that motion. Also, I'd like to ask Councilmember Hurley if he wouldn't mind adding that, do we have our state representative's phone number available, Ms. Staub?
I've got it.
if you don't mind, I'd like a letter written to him from staff, if that's agreeable with Mr. Hurley. And then, if not, if we don't get any action in the next council meeting, that we post that on HCTV and we put it in the Haltom City newsletter, and we have an article on that and ask that citizens have the opportunity to read about it and ask them to participate in the process.
I think it's a real good point that I overlooked. I'm glad you brought it up, and I would suggest that our city staff exert whatever pressure necessary on our state representative to get some state aid on this, where the city doesn't have to bear the brunt of it.
Okay, I would, Councilmember Fowler had asked if you would amend your motion to reflect that. For the sake of the record, so all of us understand what the motion is, would you repeat that motion as it reflects Councilmember Fowler's?
Number one, that the city continue to pursue the original plan of working in partnership with the Haltom Estate, using our equipment and personnel to break the dam, to drain the pond, and eventually clear it to the point to where it can be used to put fill in there, obtained by the city like Mr. Torres had originally suggested. Also, that our city staff exert whatever pressure necessary on our state representative to get whatever aid we can from the state in this project.
Okay, is that?
Yes, sir.
That's for a second. Okay, we have Councilmember Williams' light on first, and then Councilmember Sutton. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion on this motion?
For clarification, Mayor, Mr. Hurley, are you saying drain the pond immediately?
Well, I think we should pursue this as soon as we can, depending on the city's schedule and staff.
I think the quicker we drain the pond, the quicker we get it dry.
I agree.
And so I think if you drain it one day this week, the drying process will start.
I agree.
And if it gets re-dammed up, we need to monitor, and we need to work on it. I'm understanding that your motion is work in agreement with the Haltoms and the city to get the dam broke, to the process to where it can dry out.
Right.
Okay, I'll agree with the motion then.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you. Since I'm a little bit new at this, I just wanted to ask any of the councilmen if the actions here to drain the pond, break down the dam, do all that, have any cost cap in mind? Is there any estimated cost to do this on behalf of the city, or do we know those expenses that the city would incur in doing these things?
Well, if we're only talking about taking existing equipment and staff time to go out there and break the dam, I mean, that's not going to take very long to break the dam. The motion isn't real clear about clearing of the brush, which need to be done with the use of a dozer. And
I
so
think that was your original intent whenever we went up and visited the site, was originally to break the dam, drain the pond, and to bring in fill to fill up the pond and clean up the brush.
I had not planned on the city using its resources to clear the brush, but maybe that's what we're talking about today.
I wouldn't want to make the motion that the city put all their equipment up there and devote full time to it. I think this is a partnership project that Mr. Haltom's going to have to help with.
Okay, and what, is there a level of commitment that we have in mind here?
What the city manager described whenever we visited the site was that this could be a long-term project. That it would be accomplished as time permitted and personnel and equipment permitted.
We're not talking
not
about
making it a
great
top
amount of
priority, but
money,
at least starting some work on it.
especially if we're not going to put a dozer out there and clear that brush. That's where a lot of time's going to come in. And I think we're only talking about breaking the dam. We've got to set a culvert up on the north end to bring trucks in. Minimal expense, again, on the part of the city. And if the Haltoms will agree to clearing the brush, piling it up or doing whatever, but get it out of our way so we can bring trucks in to bring the dirt, that's what we need. You know, I can get the dirt there, but again, this could be a 6-month process. But it's the best time to start right now to because it's about to get hot and dry, and then
Okay.
we can proceed on with the construction part of it and doing the clearing and things like that. But we have to get that water out and let it start to dry before we do that.
you would continue to pursue the avenue of this letter of authorization and waiver?
Yes, I will, and I'll take it to Mr. Haltom and present it with him, and hopefully we can get a written agreement.
Councilmember Sutton.
Yes, I would just request that the city manager bring back to us a report of what costs have been incurred in doing this, so that the council is made aware of what the costs are to the city.
We will document.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to keep in mind if Greg and David can get with the county to get chippers, that's going to be a cost either on the Haltoms or the city's part that we're not going to have to incur. So we need to keep that, be mindful of that.
Okay. Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, two questions. City manager?
Sir.
The agreements that y'all had with Mr. Halton, do you have the letter prepared?
No, I don't.
Why is it not prepared?
I stopped when Mr. Haltom would not agree to the footing the bill for the expense of the dozer.
Well,
we
gave him a day's notice, but we didn't have the paperwork in order to have him sign I think we should have had that in order to have him sign at the time that we went out. We need to get the things lined up. We need to get that paper. We need to get Mr. Haltom, your father, and them come in and get this agreement done before we do anything.
I agree with you, but again, situations fall in your lap, and it was an opportunity to put 500 yards of good, clean fill right out there.
If I was a property owner and I had an agreement but I hadn't signed it, and they were going to come out and start dumping dirt, I would be concerned too. So I was understanding that the agreement had already been signed.
No.
So there's another deal where I had third-party information.
But there wasn't an absolute need to have an agreement at that point. I was simply, there was a gentleman that had dirt, and I introduced him to Mr. Haltom, and Mr. Haltom could tell him to come and put the dirt wherever he wanted. Mr. Haltom chose not.
Let's get that.
But the written agreement is vital to the long-term part of it.
Let's get that and get it over to him as soon as possible.
Okay, anything further in the way of discussion on this motion? Councilmember Sutton? Okay, that's where I was headed with that. We are ready to, if you will, gentlemen and ladies, register your vote on the motion before us. And that passes by unanimous vote. With your permission, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Some of us need to stretch. We'll come back and take action on item number 6 and item number 7.
Earn your money down.
When we get the city secretary in here to turn on the recording device, so we'll be legal, we'll resume this meeting. I think the city manager has gone to see if he can. There we go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to resume this meeting, and we go back now to item number 6. We'll address that one first. And item number 6 is a preliminary plat approval. Mr. Pliska, you want to introduce that? Or are we ready for Mr. Hedgecock to come forward?
I'll just submit my report, Mayor, and read the agenda item. This item is P008-03, plat approval, consideration and interaction regarding the preliminary plat of Ernest Hedgecock of Consulting Engineers, Incorporated, on behalf of Miss Mary Lancaster for the preliminary plats of lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Lancaster Addition, being a preliminary plat of Tract 4E HF Largent Survey, Abstract 959, and again, it's located on the east side of Denton Highway, containing approximately 3.16 acres of land. Again, located in the 4,000 block of Denton Highway. I formally submit to you my report and the 11 by 17 reduced copy of this preliminary plat.
Okay, you have heard the introduction by Mr. Pliska of this agenda item. Mr. Hedgecock, anything you need to add to that? Members of the council, any questions or comments regarding action item number 6? Council Member Williams, I believe your light was on first.
I'm in line for a motion when you are, Mayor.
We're ready.
Make a motion we approve plat P-010-03.
Councilmember Fowler, I believe your light was on next.
I'll second that, and I have a question when you're through.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we're ready for your question.
It's for Mr. Hedgecock. What's the design on the transition across the bar ditch area?
We'll just use a culvert, probably an 18-inch, or it's not very deep. The ditch is not very deep right there at just down from. Well, that's actually on the next item, but we're going to be putting in a car wash there on the north end of the property, and we'll have 2 driveways, and they'll probably have either 18 or 24-inch pipes to go under, and they'll drain it down. There's a catch basin down right by the cleaners on the north that catches the water and takes it back to the creek.
Mr. Hedgecock,
yes, sir. I'm Ernest Hedgecock. Sir?
No.
Oh.
Did you say the north end?
I'm sorry. It was the south end. This is on the south end, down by the convenience store. I'm sorry. Got turned around. I've been here so long, I got north and south. But there's a catch basin down by the cleaners. There's about a 2x2 box that drops into the drainage ditch. And I can't tell if the water goes back that way to the creek. I think it goes down to the big 54-inch pipe box culvert that goes underneath, that comes underneath Denton Highway and then takes it back to the creek. And we'll be running it back down there.
But it will be covered with that and either asphalt or concreted in.
You talking about our driveway? Or
yes. Well, you're cover the full span of the property or just an entrance area?
We'll be putting the 2 culverts in on each side of our property there.
And will there be an open space?
There'll be an open
ditch
space in
them?
between. Yes, yeah, there'll be an open space in between, and that'll just be an open like the bar ditch now, and it'll only be about probably 50 to 60 feet. The property's only 160 feet long, and we got 2 35-foot driveways on each end, so there's not going to be much in between. And we're going to put sidewalks in too, by the way.
Okay.
Or put up or pay our money for it.
Would I guess this question for staff? Would it be under the? I guess it wouldn't be under the plat approval then, would it? That we ask that be completely the entire 160 foot be covered.
Yes, it would be under the final plat approval on the next agenda item.
Right, so we would ask that they go ahead and cover the whole 160 foot, even though it's green space in between the 2 approach areas, that we go ahead and put the rest of the balance of that, which would probably be 50, 60 foot, you said.
Yeah,
go ahead and put pipe and then cover that ditch up, that bar ditch up at that point.
Yeah, we could probably do that because actually when you get your radiuses in there, they're almost touching each other. You know, the radiuses will be there.
That's what I was getting
we can
at.
run it, and that's probably what we'll do. We'll put the pipe all the way across between the 2 driveways, and then cover it over.
I'd like to probably not make that. I'd like to make that contingent upon that. So if you need to take it from there, Mr. Pliska, that we.
Yeah, it would be. You would want to do that during the plat approval process. So if you would want to make that contingent on it, I would suggest it on the final plat. This is the preliminary.
Right. Okay.
On item number 7, this should be addressed rather than item number 6. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Mayor. That is, in council, that's reflective of the construction drawings and accompaniment with the final plat.
Okay. This is a preliminary plat we're addressing in item number 6. Councilmember
Thank you. That's it. Yes, sir.
Councilmember Averett?
That was for a second, Mayor.
Councilmember Williams, discussion on the motion to approve.
I think I read the wrong plat number. I did. I read the wrong plat number. Let me restate that.
Any further? Excuse me.
Let me correct my motion on that. I read the wrong plat number.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve plat P-008-003.
Okay. Motion and the second reflects that correction. Further discussion on the motion. There being none, if you'll register your vote. And that passes unanimously. We come now to item 7, which is the final plat of this same piece of property.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, consideration and/or action regarding the application of Mr. Ernest Hedgecoth of Consulting Engineers Incorporated on behalf of Ms. Mary Lancaster for the final plat of Lot 1, Block 1, Lancaster Addition, being a final plat of Tract 4E, HF Largent Survey, Abstract 959, located on the east side of Denton Highway, again containing approximately .5711 acres of land located in the 4,000 block of Denton Highway. I formally submit my report on this in the 11 by 17 reduced copy of the final plat.
Councilmember Fowler, are you ready to make a motion reflecting the concern you had a moment ago?
Yes, sir. I move for approval of P-010-03 for approval of the final plat contingent upon the entire length of the property, the 160 some odd plus or minus feet, to be whatever suitable size of drainage structure, and then to be completely covered, even green space area, approaches and green space area to be covered at that time.
Have a motion. Councilmember Avery.
That's for a second, Mayor.
Councilmember Williams.
Mr. Pliska, I guess this will be for you. On this piece of property, will there be any landscape required?
Yes, the property is zone C3. We visited this about 2 months prior, and there is mandatory landscaping requirements for this district.
Would it be possible then, since we're having them put the pipe in there, that green space could be part of their landscaping? Count toward part of their...
I would have to refer that to either the engineer or Mr. Hedgecock, but I believe that's going to be in the right-of-way.
Right.
Okay.
His landscaping's got to be on his property, not in the right of way.
Okay.
I mean, it could look nice, but it can't count towards it.
We can't count all points for it looking nice.
Anything further, Councilmember
No, sir.
Williams? Councilmember Henderson, discussion on the motion.
James, did we ever, I know the guy that was looking to buy this piece of property, he was wanting sewer or water or something. Did he ever find that? I know he was having difficulty.
Yes, he did. He located it behind, and Mr. Hedgecock can comment on that, the Dairy Queen.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Henderson. We did a little research, and we were able to, there's a sewer line in Diamond Oaks Drive that comes up and serves the Dairy Queen,
Okay.
and also serves the convenience store on the corner.
And he'll be able to hook in.
We'll be connecting there and running up to Denton Highway, and then down Denton Highway to our south end of our north end of our property, which will be the 167 feet there.
Good enough,
And
thanks.
then we're doing the same thing with the water. The water will be connected at there's a water line stub out right there at the corner of Diamond Oaks. We'll be running it down there and then looping it back under Denton Highway so that we'll have a loop system. That will probably be the last people that can tie onto that sewer line because it's pretty shallow when it gets on the other end. But there's plenty of sewer down going across the apartment property. So I've already talked to Mr. Haltom about if any development goes in on the remaining portion, lot 2 of this property, of this preliminary plat, we can drain it through the apartment sewer back there.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Further discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote, I will display it, and it passes by unanimous vote. We move now to item number 12. This is consideration and/or action on the use of city computers by the City Council. Councilmember Williams, I believe you placed this on the agenda. Would you like to introduce this item at this time and conclude it by, if you would, please, a recommendation on how you'd like to proceed with this?
Yes, sir. This item came up, I had a couple of fellow council members brought to my attention the laptop computers. I'd forgot about the laptop computers that Ms. Harris had ordered for the council members when she was secretary. She put in her budget, I think it was last year or year before last or something. 2 years. It's been 2 years ago. It was a very good idea to come up with these laptop computers. If we'd got them to work properly, we were going to go to a paperless agenda. And if y'all are wondering why we're talking about that, this is just a half of what we're throwing away tonight that came out of the agenda, and we still got half the agenda book to go. So you take that amount of papers and you multiply it times 8, and then times all the staff members, comes into quite a bit of paper. The time these laptops were ordered, Philip Jennings was a city council person, and we like to refer to him as our computer guru. He, or a geek, whichever we wanted to call him. He worked very hard on this, but very many hours in trying to get it perfected. I think pretty well the reception of these laptops was a failure after we got them. Once we got them and got them up and running, I refused one at the time that they had them because I didn't have my own computers and I didn't need a laptop. Can't use one driving and can't use one unless I'm here, and so that's really not a reason. We have a full computer system back here in the council and mayor's chamber for any council member that wants to use it. We had $500 in our budget for software, and it's my understanding that we took $319 of this $500 budget and put it on one computer. If you divide that up between the rest of the council members, that leaves $25 a piece for their software or whatever they need. I don't know who approved the putting the programs on there, the type programs that were put on. I'm not sure that all the programs put on this computer were actually needed or used in the line of being a council member. I don't use any of that. I've got PowerPoint that I made a PowerPoint presentation one time for one of the boards I was on, but that's the only time I've ever used a PowerPoint since being a council member in 5 years. And so I'd ask for this to be placed on here not only as a computer, but also as our computer in our budget, the council's budget. Different things come up during the year, seminars that we need to go to, traveling, and I was just wanting to bring it up, open it up to the council, see what their feelings were about the laptops. I think those computers could probably be better used somewhere in the city, possibly in the senior citizen center for a training tool, over at the library for a training tool, or possibly even some of the staff members here at the city. Many of them work very, very long hours here. Some of them take their work home with them. It'd give them the opportunity to carry some of their work home since they're compatible with the programs and stuff being used in the city. So I'd like to throw that out to the council. I'd like to give those laptops somewhere else where they can be used in a better manner and make a better use of this taxpayer money.
So that's your recommendation that the
That's in form
computers-
of a motion if you like it.
We've got it in the form of a motion.
Yeah, to take the laptops and put them in another part of the city that would be better
Council
uses.
Member Henderson?
No, I'll second that.
Okay, Councilmember Avery?
Mayor, I have one quick question for Councilmember Williams. Now, at whose discretion will it be to where these computers go?
That's a good question, Councilmember Avery. I'm sure that there's probably a need. I saw a couple of head of staff members shake their head out there at the time that I was speaking. Many places that they can use. You know, these guys, they go home. If they want to take their work home with them, I think we ought to provide them a tool to take them home. And not only the computers, but we need some sort of a system. With the budget being tight, we've got our. I commend Councilmember Fowler for saying earlier, just do away with the council's budget altogether. We had a very serious discussion here a few weeks ago about laying off people, and I don't think that was the desire of the council at that time. And so I would like to put some kind of a hold on this spending, find out who's responsible for the budget, who turns it loose, who okays to let it be spent. Otherwise, I could go to the city manager and say that I want 3/4 of the budget, give it to me. And who's to tell him not to?
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Torres, Councilmember Williams asked a question a moment ago, and I'd like to get a little bit of clarity on that about the spending of the $319 on the software. Could you shed some light on that, about how all of that happened and who authorized that?
Okay, I authorized the expenditure of $319,000 because I have the authority to do it. If one council member comes in and asks for something, I have typically done what I could and to accommodate that council member, just as I would do for any of you. And that's well within my authority to do that, and I'll defend my action in any way I need to. If, for, you know, obviously there's a problem, and it's a problem that y'all need to work out about the expenditure of your budget and how that works and who's got authority to do what. There is no policy right now. And if it's going to be a problem, I would recommend that maybe we take a look at adopting a policy for the expenditure of city council budget and how that works. I mean, there are many examples I can offer. Council member wants to come in and travel to a conference, and I know there's some of those coming up. There's a pot of money allocated for city council. A council member comes in and says, I'd like to go to this conference, and he spends some money, and we authorize it. I mean, there is no policy, so there's no reason to deny it. If the money's there and the council member asks for it, it has been the policy, unwritten as it is, to grant that, you know, within reason. And since I've been here, we have placed software and added things to those laptops in the past. So the fact that we upgraded the software on this one laptop this time is no different than what had been done in the past. It's just been the practice.
We'd put all those programs on laptops in the past?
That is correct. That is correct.
Which council member got that?
Whoever, I mean, I couldn't tell you who had what laptop or what software was put on it, but I know that our IT department has put software on those laptops in the past and has done work to them in the past. And if there's somebody out there that can help me out and be specific, please do, because I like it cleared up. We need a policy. We need some direction from the council about what your expectations are from staff about spending money, because that's clearly a problem for staff.
Mr. Torres is right in that the software has been placed on the computers. You're asking specifically about the software that was put, the software for the $319, that Microsoft Office Suite package. That package has not been placed on any of their laptops. So I don't think you guys were.
No, I didn't say that software, but
that's what he was talking. I think that's what he was talking about.
Right.
But no, that the entire Office Suite package. Now I think there had been some Microsoft packages that had been put on those laptops, specifically exactly which ones I don't know at this time, but I can tell you that Office Suite package, that the $319 that we spent on that, has not been placed on any of their laptops as it is.
But virtually all the software that's on those 5 laptops right now has been placed by the city at city expense.
In the past, on spending for account, you brought up the seminars and the things that the council goes to.
Correct.
Prior to Mrs. Staub being here and prior to you being here, Helen Harris probably worked pretty well with the council's budget and on a year-to-year basis, letting us know what was available. And if there was a seminar come up, she would, in the open session during the pre-council, she would say that I have this seminar coming up. It's going to be like in December. It's going to be at Salt Lake City. How many council members will want to go? And it would, you know, a couple of council members want to go. Some of them never want to go. And you know, it's the opportunity. The budget's there to go. You know, if the money's there. I don't know how much money will be in the budget this year. You know, we're talking about a tight budget. There may not be any travel money or any.
It's pretty well depleted
and
now.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And I would hate to take money from the budget as high as it is, because we need every employee that we got. We need to do everything we say the employees. So I think anywhere that we can cut and take things that aren't what I would call a luxury. You know, I expect, as being a council member, I expect to have to furnish some of my own tools for this. My cell phone, my pager, my constituents get a hold of me on that. All that's paid for out of my pocket. The city doesn't pay for it. And I think in the budget that we're in this year, I think we need to tighten our belt up, and I think we need to take these computers that Miss Harris ordered for us a couple of years ago. It's my understanding they were refurbished when we got them. And I'd like to take them and put them in somewhere in the city that we could use them and be better served.
And that would be my request, is if the council is going to give up those 5 laptops, I would like them to be just directed back to staff and let us make the decisions about where they go.
What went with the other 3? There were 8.
No. I think there were only 5.
Was there just 5?
There were only 5.
Right.
I'd understood they'd ordered 8.
No, I don't think there was ever 8.
5. Only 5.
Okay.
And there are 5 presently accounted for right now.
Right.
But let us make the decision about where they go. I'll probably have some input in that myself. I couldn't tell you right now who really needs a laptop.
I would like
at
to
their
know
disposal.
I'd like to know where they went when we do that.
That's not a problem. I mean,
Okay.
we can tell you where any computer is assigned to whoever. I mean, that is not a problem. But I'd like us to sit down and make that decision rather than the council make it right now, not really knowing who really is deserving, who needs a laptop. There may be some people that don't have a computer at their disposal right now that we may in fact just assign them a laptop to use at their desk. I mean, I've done that myself. But let us make that decision is what I would request.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams?
No.
Councilmember Sutton had his light on first, followed by Councilmember Henderson, and then Councilmember Fowler.
Well, the facts in this matter bring any reasonable person to the conclusion that the previous council's decision to acquire laptops was progressive and value-based. My actions in securing this laptop that was used by a former councilman are wholly in line with reasonable actions to make the best use of tools and assets provided to councilmen to execute their elected responsibilities. What are the facts in this case? The facts are that, like has been mentioned, the city secretary had a budget line item for cell phones. Some of the councilmen said we would rather like laptops than councilmen. So she sent out a memo, and that memo came back, and 2 of the councilmen said very strongly, we want laptops. 2 of them said they didn't want to have anything to do with laptops because they didn't want to use computers. Okay? After a consensus was reached by the council, Helen Harris, the former secretary, ordered 4 Dell laptops. After she got those 4 Dell laptops, she found another budget item that was under, and she used that budget item to purchase a 5th Dell laptop. Now, the 5th was going to be for the mayor, but the mayor had requested a clarification of the policy for what happens whenever a laptop is either stolen or damaged. And since the staff did not provide that clarification, that policy, Mayor White did not take possession of a laptop at the time. Well, almost immediately, the laptops purchased by the councilmen that got them were used. What happens is they began to use the CD-ROMs that were burned for the city council papers that Councilman Williams was talking about before, and the taxpayers of Haltom City began to realize a benefit. We were able to start passing off this medium that we get on paper onto digital medium. It provides several benefits. 1, we didn't have to recycle this paper. 2, it allowed for future archive by the councilman to look into those previous notes just by pulling up a CD-ROM and looking at that. So there were some good benefits that were realized right off the bat by the laptops. But I want to say this, the potential benefits that the laptops meant for the councilmen still far outweighed the actual uses of the laptops at the time. Somewhere along the line, the city's lack of an information technology expert resulted in glitches happening with the burning of the CD-ROMs for the city council meetings. Some of the council members were affected by this and other ones weren't. But there was a great deal of frustration that began to be realized by some of the councilmen in accessing the agenda items on the CD-ROMs. So at some point, the practice of receiving CD-ROMs was terminated by the council. After that, they pretty much got put in the closet. Some of the councilmen hang on to the laptops and just used them. Now, after when I was elected, I knew of the laptops, and I knew that the laptops could be used for many purposes by the council members. Since at least 2 of the council members had laptops at the time, I made a request to receive one of the laptops. The city manager said he could secure one at no cost to the city, and so I took possession of it almost immediately. I believe Brenda gave it to me just the next day. So that was at no cost to the city for me to have a laptop to use in the execution of my responsibilities as an elected official. I started using it immediately because one of the things that was loaded on there that the former city secretary thoughtfully loaded onto there was the city ordinances. I used it on several conversations at home whenever I'd pull up the ordinances on the laptop, and boy, they were right there, and I could refer to them directly. Fantastic use of a laptop. I noticed, however, that Microsoft Office, which the entire city staff uses now per the city manager's policy, was not loaded on the laptops. Now, I've already started working with Pat Elfrink with Excel spreadsheets. I've already started working with some of the other councilmen with, not councilmen, but staff with WordPerfect. Not WordPerfect, but Word. I know that in the future I will be using PowerPoint, and there's a very good possibility that I'll be doing some Access databases. Those are the 4 components of Microsoft Office that are used. We use them significantly in the technology sector that I'm a part of. You can't run a business in the technology sector today without those 4 applications. I know that that's my expertise, and I will be using that laptop for those things. Now, I asked the city manager, would it be possible to load Microsoft Office on this laptop since it's not on there? And I want to be compatible with what the city is doing. And the city manager came to me and says, it would be no problem to do that. We have the budget. It's something that would provide a much greater benefit than the actual cost to be able to interface with the city by the city councilman. And so we did that. I brought the laptop back, and within a day, he had it upgraded for the office applications, and they're already working great. Now, I foresee at least 8 benefits for council members having laptops. Here's the 8. 1, it's going to enhance their communication with city staff. I think it's important that city councilmen work on enhanced communication with the city staff, and one of the ways they can do that is with a laptop. 2, the ability to review in-depth material at lower paper cost to the city, thereby indirectly contributing to lowering the need to raise taxes. The ability to archive important information for future reference in digital form in the CD-ROMs. I think it's invaluable. If you come up, like just a few nights ago at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was thinking of something, and I had the laptop there, and I was able to pull it up and bring it in. But there's going to be times whenever late at night, I'm not going to be able to call Brenda or Richard or Tom and ask them, but if I have that CD-ROM with the previous council meetings, I can get in there and reference that information. Number 4, better access to public information requests for the citizens of Haltom City. Now, having email on your home computer exposes a councilman to public information requests. And one of the reasons that they got these laptops was so that open record requests by the citizens of Haltom City could be served. A lot of times whenever you try to get email from a councilman's home computer, they will say, we don't have any email. Well, if you have a city laptop where those transactions are going on, it's a whole lot easier for the citizens of Haltom City to put open record requests for what email has transacted if the city council has a laptop. Laptops, number 5, provide a great way to share visual information in small groups and meetings. And Councilman Williams mentioned that with one of the PowerPoint presentations that he did for one of the boards. That's a great way to share concepts and ideas. I think that's PowerPoint and some of the office suites give you a fantastic tool to present information that you might not be able to do just by speaking. Number 6, laptops are a great on-site scheduling, note-taking, and calculation tool for council members. And I can think of several places where I can use those right off the bat. Number 7, laptops provide the capability to access city email while on travel. Some of us will be on travel, and we want to be responsive to our constituents here in Haltom City. Having a laptop with us, I don't have the money for a laptop. Our budget is not, our money doesn't grow in trees in my yard, contrary to what you may have heard. We struggle just to make it. Anyways, the laptop will provide a great thing for getting email if I have to go on travel with either my company or the city. And I can get the email and respond to my constituents' needs. And I think all the council members would like to do that. Number 8, migrating to the use of digital medium in lieu of paper is an environmentally friendly policy. Instead of recycling all the scads of paper, I think that it would be an environmentally friendly policy to do that. Now, the benefits go beyond these 8 benefits that I've already mentioned, as anyone that works in the technology sector can tell you. Now, why is this request being made at this time by my fellow council member? I've already stated that the councilman who placed this request on the agenda had no interest in ever receiving a laptop. Knowing that the senior center has 6 desktop computers which are currently underutilized according to people that frequent the center, and knowing that laptops with their characteristically small keys and more difficult human interfaces, if you've ever used a laptop, you know what I'm talking about. They're typically never used for training purposes by any reputable organization. And knowing that other municipalities in this area, our state and our nation, are embracing technological tools to enhance their service to their constituents, I question the wisdom of this motion. I've already stated that just recently 2 of the current council members returned their laptops to the city secretary's office, apparently in anticipation of this item being placed on the council's agenda this evening. Now, we have a motto here in Haltom City called Proud and Progressive. I think whenever we don't realize the benefit to all the council members that they can use with these laptops into their constituents and to this Haltom City, we're being more ashamed and regressive. Ashamed by first being ashamed of embracing technology, which can benefit both this council and their members and the city and our constituents, and regressive by focusing on budget issues that are an order of magnitude less than other looming budget issues that we're facing in the city. So, I want to move a substitute motion, Mayor White, that we table this agenda item and learn to work together as elected officials in making Haltom City a flagship city for the Metroplex, demonstrating by our actions and our words that we're willing to work with each other on this council for what can be one of the best years ever. John Williams last year, one of the best years ever for this council of elected representatives and the citizens of Haltom City. I make that motion. Substitute motion.
Councilmember Sutton, let me ask you this. Since we have 2 individuals who had their lights on prior to your speaking and making this presentation you've made that ended with a request to make a substitute motion,
yes,
I think it would be in order for both of these to be heard in whatever comments they had before we proceed with addressing the issue of a substitute motion. With that, I'd like to call on Councilmember Henderson, and when Councilmember Henderson and Councilmember Fowler finish, we can come back to address the issue of your substitute motion. But I think just professional courtesy to colleagues should allow them, and I have a comment to make too before we come to that, with your consent. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with about 3/4 of what Councilmember Sutton said. I was one of the council members that wanted to embrace technology, if you will. Approximately a year and a half ago, I wanted a laptop. I wanted to go to a paperless agenda. Unfortunately, that never happened. I don't know. Councilmember Sutton said of lack of an IT department expert. That could be the problem. I don't know. I've had a laptop for, like I said, approximately a year and a half, and I maybe used it in a city manner half a dozen times. It wasn't because I didn't know how to use the laptop. I work on a computer all day. It was because I didn't have the technology to use the computer at my hands. At this time, I don't see spending any more money to bring the other council members up to speed with laptops. If we only have 5, we need 3 more. An additional $1,000 a piece at minimum, plus programming. We're looking upwards of spending another $5,000 to get the whole entire council on board with the laptop and programs. I'm not in favor of that. I did turn my laptop in, one of the ones that turned them in about a week ago. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. I never used it. The item was on the agenda. I knew how I felt about the situation, so I turned my laptop in. If it can be better utilized somewhere else, I think it needs to be used somewhere else. With that being said, I'll defer to whoever's speaking next.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to clarify on the policy, make a suggestion that we instruct our staff that, I don't know if y'all would like to add that to a motion, that we instruct our staff not to provide any future expenditures until we do have a policy in place, unless it comes before the council on a vote, whether it be purchase of another laptop or software or whatever, you know, or shirts or whatever the case may be. I'd just as soon us not spend anything on the council without all 7 council members voting on it. That might clarify, or it might be, until we can get a policy in place, that might simplify some of these questions that we have. As far as IT and computer technology and all that, I mean, personally, it would be nice to have a paperless agenda, but I could care less about it. If someone needs to get me, they can call me on my cell phone or fax me, and that's about the extent of my IT technology or whatever the case may be. So it matters not one way or another. To me, if one council person wants to be, do everything off the computer, and the others want to do it off a paper agenda, that's each individual council member's choice or personal preference. That matters not, but I would recommend the policy standpoint that we do not make expenditures on anything unless it come before the council for approval, and that would take some of the pressure off staff in making decisions on the council budget. It's just a difficult situation. I can understand where Richard and Brenda both, if one council person comes and asks Richard for something and there's $300 or $500 budgeted, and one expenditure's $300, and then let's just say I come in and ask for $250 worth of something, all of a sudden we're over budget, and Richard made one decision one morning, and in the afternoon I asked Brenda for something, or one of the other council members did. All of a sudden we're over budget, and neither one, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. So I think that this is something that needs to come before the council on any expenditure. That's all I have.
Anything further? Okay.
No, if they just might consider adding that or amending a motion, either motion, to include that.
I want to state the mayor's position on this. I think sometime, because I'm so involved in conducting the mechanics of the meeting, I fail to allow the citizens to know my position on this. I was here, and I am aware that the majority of this council, who currently sits today, was in favor of going paperless and in purchasing the laptops, and I think that's been about 3 years ago. And I think there's a place for that. And I think we're going to see as time goes on, we'll have more and more of that. Many of the cities in the area, including our neighboring cities, council members have laptops, and they use them to varying degrees of efficiency. The ISDs, when I was on the Birdville board, starting in 91, I believe it was 93, we were issued laptops and that type thing. So I'm very much in favor of the technology and the laptops and the computers, and I believe very strongly in that. However, Councilmember Sutton is right. I think he was here in a meeting when we talked about this earlier. Because of a lack of policy on the part of Haltom City, I would not accept a laptop because I needed to know if that was lost while in my custody, or if it was damaged, was I liable? And no answer was ever given, and so until that answer was given, I was not interested in taking possession of any of the computers. I wouldn't mind having one today. I could use it somewhat. I have a computer at home, a desktop. I have one at the office. But this can be a very efficient way for us to be able to conduct business. So I believe there's very definitely a place for technology to be used by council members to do their job. But because there was no policy, I chose not to accept one, and I will not accept one if it were offered now without that policy being in place. I do know that the laptops that we currently have in place did not have a spreadsheet on them. It had Corel, had WordPerfect, but there was no spreadsheet. If I understand correctly, what I heard a moment ago, what council and from what Councilmember Sutton and City Manager Richard Torres said, all Councilmember Sutton was asking is that the computer that was placed in his custody be compatible with, comparable to what city staff had. And city staff has Office loaded on every computer. So I don't see the big deal in regard to this. I understand budget constraints, and I understand that we need to be careful, and I understand Richard's position regarding needing to have a policy. It does put the council in quite a spot. But having said that, I bring my comments to a conclusion. No other lights are on. I'd like for the motion to be restated. Councilmember Sutton?
I just would like to make a substitute motion that we table this and work out the policy that we're going to use as councilmen as to how we're going to split the money up and what our laptop policy will be. I think that there is a difference in how we perceive technology on this council, and it doesn't need to be something that divides us, but it can be something that that we work together with to realize that each of us have strengths in different areas. This happens to be one of the areas that Tracy and myself have a little bit more proficiency. Diane also does. We would like to be able to use these tools in executing our office here as elected representatives of Haltom City, elected councilmen. So I would ask that we table this and let's continue the dialogue about what we need to do with the laptops. If some of them need to go back in, or if we need to give some of them back to the staff, or if we just need to not use laptops at all. But I feel like it needs more discussion amongst us before we can make a decision. So I would move a substitute motion to table this agenda item for this evening.
Okay, according to the rules of procedure, the parliamentary procedure that I use in the course of conducting the meeting, when a motion is made in the form of a substitute motion, we need to go ahead, the council needs to go ahead and address whether it wants to accept that substitute motion or not. And then once that's settled, then we can go back to the previous. So at this time, we do have a substitute motion that has been recommended that we table this, and I'm asking now for a second on that. Do either of the Councilmember Hurley or Councilmember Branson wish to second this motion? Councilmember Hurley?
I have a comment for Mr. Sutton's benefit. The reason that the laptops did not work was because Helen Harris could not burn CDs for us. I had one, I had it loaded, and I used it. The entire charter's on there, and the code book is on there. But the idea of going to a paperless agenda, as I look back, I don't think it was the best idea at that time. I think it was too soon for Haltom City because we're all used to looking at paper. And I think it's too soon for us now.
We have a motion.
Excuse me. Helen was not capable of burning CDs to get them to us. Every one that we had was messed up. So we gave up after a while.
Yeah. As she related to me too.
That was for clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to present a substitute motion for this council to consider. Councilmember Branson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll second Councilmember Sutton's motion to table it.
Okay, so we have a motion before us to table, and we need to address that at this time. If you feel we should table this motion, vote yes. If you feel we should not table this motion, vote no. Councilmember Sutton, before I call for the vote, your light came on.
I just want to ask my fellow council members to consider that we could have some more meaningful discussion on what to do with these laptops at a later time, whenever we can have more discussion on what the purpose of these laptops are. And I just appreciate their consideration of that.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you. I may make an alternate deal out there. If y'all'd like to go to a paperless agenda and like to go to the laptops, I'd be in full favor for it if the council members pay for their own laptops, and I'll be willing to pay for my own. I can't make the city payment, for toys and trinkets. I've got a phone right here a while ago, and I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna call them, somebody's phone's gonna ring. You're talking about getting a hold of people. Somebody's phone's gonna vibrate here in just a minute. Will they raise their hand? That man right there. Richard's got the same phone handle. Each one of these staff members got one of these telephones. I can call nearly any one of them 24/7, and they'll pick that phone up right away. I got Richard on the golf course the other day, or Tom. I can't accept trinkets and toys. I've got a couple of shirts I've got from the city, and I appreciate that. I spend 20 hours a week or better on council stuff. My phone rings constantly. I'm going to say 60% of my cell phone bill is off citizen complaints and stuff. And in lieu of looking at laying off employees and the budget that we're looking at and the way that Haltom City is right now, I can't go along with that. So I'm going to be voting no toward this. I think we need to go ahead and get them out of the way, go on down and get after some business.
Councilmember Sutton, and after you've spoken, I'll call for a vote on the motion to table.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Williams talked about the laptops as trinkets and toys, and I was wondering, why did he vote for them in the first place if he felt like they were trinkets and toys? That's all.
I didn't vote for him.
If I might just make a point of information, I don't know that we ever voted for that.
Helen just put them in the
There
budget.
was never any action taken by the council. I think a budget was approved early that had some $4,000 in it for cell phones and some other things, and then through the course of conversation, without any kind of motion being made to do that, I think there was general agreement among the council that that would be a better expense. But as far as anybody voting to purchase computers, we never did do that. So
Thank you for the clarification.
Just a point of clarification. So again, the motion is to table. And if you're in favor of tabling this, vote yes. If you're in support of not tabling this, vote no. Okay. So if I understand correctly, don't turn your lights off just yet. If I understand correctly, what we have here, the motion was to table. And we have 5 votes to table and 2 votes not to table. So the motion the motion to table carries.
How long y'all gonna table this, for what period of time, when it will be addressed again?
It's may I respond to that? Yeah, a table it can be picked up at any subsequent meeting and can be put on the agenda at any subsequent meeting. But I would recommend that we all talk among ourselves and try to come up with a policy before we put it on the agenda again.
Okay, I think that item has been addressed, so we have tabled this until a future council agenda, and it will come back up for the council, and maybe in the meantime we can get some kind of policy, Mr. Torres, in connection with that regarding how those types of decisions are made on that. Okay, we're ready now to move to item 13, and that is
Mayor,
the monthly...
point of order, I had a light on, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Looking...
I'd just like to ask that, I don't know if it was considered to be part of the motion that we not ask the city for any further expenditures until we do a policy or not. Was that part of the motion, Councilmember Sutton?
I would definitely see that as a friendly amendment to the motion, yes, or a friendly addition to the motion, yes. So yes, it was. It will be.
Okay, so or if not, I'd ask my colleagues not to ask staff to make any expenditures on our behalf as any of the council members until we have a policy in place.
Okay. We're ready now for the monthly financial report. Mr. Pat Elfrink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is the report for the month ending April You normally would have seen this report at the second meeting in May, but there was no meeting, so you have it tonight. What we have here is at the end of April, 7 months of the 12-month fiscal year have gone by. That's 58% of the year. In the broad view overall for the general fund, I've seen very little change. That is of a material amount. Something, nothing really noteworthy has occurred. Some of the same problems continue to plague us, but we haven't seen any significant worsening or betterment in some of these issues. The sales tax payment for the month of March for sales that retailers made in the month of March was the lowest in 3 years. It came in at $381,000 compared to 2002 when it was $410,000. In the year before that, in 2001, it was $424,000. So we've got a pretty solid indication there of a declining trend. Licenses and permits, one of our major revenue categories, is at 35% of its budget. We'd like to see that a little bit higher. Some of that is seasonal in nature, some of the revenue there. Building permits and licenses may pick up as we get into the summer months here now. One of our other major categories of revenues for the general fund is fines and fees, and they are still underperforming, as I have reported in the past, with 45% of fines and fees that are budgeted being collected thus far. With a budget of $1,085,000, we've received $490,000. On the expenditure side in the general fund, on page 3, you'll see a listing of each of the major departments and divisions in the general fund. With a $14.5 million budget, we have spent $8,144,000 at the end of April for a percentage expenditure of 56%. So that is still it's not a lot, but it's a good trend. It shows that there's a lot of budget discipline going on. 58% of the year has passed, but 56% of the budget has been spent. Believe me, the message has gone all the way down to everyone to try and control expenditures and be careful of what we're doing there. Unfortunately, it's not enough to make up for the revenue shortfalls that we are perceiving. On page 4, you will see a summary of the water fund accounts. This also includes what we refer to as the water fund capital accounts. It includes the massive sewer infiltration work that's being done and also the construction of the public works building. We have 52% of the revenues in at this time at about $6 million in our water fund and 39% of our budgeted expenditures. Having 52% of our revenues is not really a bad sign at this point in time, though, because we still have the heavy sales months, hopefully, of the summer coming up. One other thing that I want to point out to you, on page 5, you have a listing for the Crime Control District. Some of you may be aware that we did have a meeting of the Crime District Board a few weeks ago, at which point we basically broke the news to them for the first time in a formal manner that their fund, their operations are totally reliant on the sales tax also. And even though it's a quarter-cent sales tax, the problem is actually magnified with the crime district because it's their only source. With the general fund and the other funds, we have multiple sources of revenue to rely upon. With the crime district, that one source is suffering, and so they have some serious budget issues that the city manager and others are working on to address.
If I could add to that, Pat, that is the reason the decision was made not to purchase the police cars, right, to go ahead and hold off because they were going to be funded from this fund. So that we have not taken any action on that.
Right. And one of the things that, at least in that fund, and I have to give our chief of police some credit here, I think it's a great idea, is we're looking at, in the long term for that particular fund is perhaps not use the money for operational type expenditures. That fund has, I think, 7 personnel in it and 8, thank you. We wish to keep those people on board, but in the future, what we may do is shift some of those staffing expenditures to the general fund and use, maybe not all of it, but a larger percentage, a much larger percentage of the sales tax revenues for capital items. And we do have capital items related to law enforcement that we need every year, but if for some reason that funding in the future took a nosedive, it's much easier to put off purchase of some capital items than it is to lay off personnel. The last thing I'd like to point out to the council is simply that we do have $22 million in the bank now that's being invested. That amount is declining steadily as the year goes by. That's typical. We receive the bulk of our funds in the month of January and February when property taxes are collected. And also we have issued all the bonds that we're going to issue thus far this year. So as the fire station is being constructed, the public works facility, the recreation center, those funds will be going down a bit in the future. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer.
Councilmember Fowler, you had your light on a moment ago. You have...
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'm sorry. It's about the police units. I was just going to make sure that was the case, but that's all I had.
Councilmember Williams?
I'd like to point out that we did put out for bid, or we're supposed to put out bid for squad cars. I think it's probably a good thing that we threw the deal in there and asked for that. If hadn't, we'd be in quite a jam right now.
We might have been pulling that order because we would have been taking a look at that situation, but you're right. I'm glad we didn't make that purchase.
You're quite welcome.
Councilmember Sutton?
In lieu of the time, I just want to ask about one thing to look at. Non-departmental general fund expenditures shows that it's pretty high for the year, although the overall general fund expenditures is well within budget. Is there some reason for this overage in a non-departmental?
Yeah, that's typical. That is one of the larger expenditures in non-departmental is for our annual property and casualty insurance premium. We pay that up front at the beginning of the year. I think it's about $120,000. There are also some large transfers in that fund that take place at the very beginning of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what it is. Sure.
That's great.
I don't believe we need to take any action, or do we, on accepting the financial report?
We have typically done that, yes.
Okay, I'm in line for a motion regarding accepting the financial report. Councilmember Henderson.
Move to approve the financial report.
Councilmember Avery. Have a motion, a second to approve, if you'll register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote. Our next report tonight is our capital improvement status report. Assistant City Manager Tom Muir.
I'm going to try and be very quick. I will do my best. We'll start off with Broadway. Utility work is about 95% complete, with remaining work being on the drainage inlets on the south side of Broadway Avenue. The contractor is focusing his attention now on paving two particular areas: the north side of Broadway down towards the east, and on the south side of Broadway down towards Beach. But other than that, the project is still tracking. He's for fall. We're hoping, praying, it'll be finished in fall of 2003. Lindsay, Revere, and Roxy. Utility work on, as far as utility work that has already been completed on Lindsay and Roxy. Utility work on Revere is currently underway, being done by the staff. Street portion is being performed by Reliable Paving. They were recently awarded a contract to do the concrete work, and they're already out there on Roxy. That should be finished by early July, followed by Lindsay, and then Revere shortly thereafter. But all of that will take about 6 months to complete. Should be complete by October 2003, excuse me. Mona, I've gotten several calls from residents about Mona. The engineering and design will be complete in a couple of months and should be bid out by July, with construction to start sometime in October. Joy Lee, the city will perform the water and sewer work, with the contractor performing the street reconstruction portion of that. A pre-construction conference has already been held last week with the contractor. This project is funded by the CDBG and administered by Tarrant County. So that thing should be starting by late this month and take about 6 months to complete. Haley Avenue, there's been some comment tonight already on Haley Avenue. TXU and Encore were delayed in mobilizing and finishing their work. Staff is currently out there now doing the street work and should be finished in a matter of days. North Beach, the service road is open. Opened about 2 weeks ago, I think. So that's substantially complete. Let me jump all the way over to the building projects. The Public Works facility, if y'all haven't been by there, there's red iron or gray iron. I forget what the color of the iron is. The structure is up. The decking is already being established. Interior walls, they're starting with that now. So that is tracking very well. The rec center, the piers have been drilled and poured. We had difficulties with the piers and the drilling. We had to go much deeper than we originally anticipated. But that's been completed. Demolition of certain parts of the rec center have already been started. Underground plumbing and electrical work is in progress, as well as establishing the grade beams. The central fire station, that is also tracking very well. The drilled piers have been complete. The grade beams have been poured. Everything with that is tracking very, very well. I just want to finish up with the beautification project on Belknap that TxDOT did award a contract to, I believe it was Meridian Construction last week. They had a pre-construction conference. They should be mobilizing in just a couple of weeks and starting that, so we'll be very excited to get that underway and finished. With that, I'll complete the report.
Questions or comments for Mr. Muir? I believe not. Thank you very much. No actions required on this. Our economic development status report.
Couple of comments if I could. This is kind of a new addition to the agenda where we're going to have an economic development report for the council and the public, and this will typically follow the capital improvement project report that Tom's been doing for the last year or so. So it's 11:35.
Take it away. Yeah. Keep it brief.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to briefly report on some of the activities, economic development activities of the last month. During the week of May 18th, I attended the International Council of Shopping Centers annual spring convention. This is the largest deal-making event of the year for retailers and the developers who serve them. It was quite well attended. If you can imagine the entire population of Haltom City under one roof and one convention hall at the same time, you start to get an idea of the intensity of this event. I attended as part of a 6-member team of the Quad Cities DFW team, and our primary mission was to get the Quad Cities on the map and impress retailers with our combined buying power, demographics, and locational advantages. Jointly, we met with 70 retailers. I also met individually with targeted retailers and developers to market Haltom City specifically. I met with established retailers that are underrepresented in the Quad Cities market. Also met with new retailers that are proposing to come to this Dallas-Fort Worth area for the first time in the near future. And although grocers do not typically attend this convention, I was able to make significant progress at the convention towards facilitating a future sale of our vacant Winn-Dixie at Glenview and 377. As I've presented in previous meetings, the filling of this vacant store is complicated by the long-term lease that Winn-Dixie has on the building till 2018. I was able to meet at the convention with the Chicago broker who is responsible for marketing all the remaining Texas Winn-Dixies. At my urging over the last several months, this broker has been looking into ways to break down the obstacles that have frustrated the possible sale of the building as opposed to a sublease. At our meeting at the convention, we were able to determine that there is a way for a grocer to buy the Winn-Dixie lease out thereby facilitating a grocer to take another look at the property. And I got a commitment from this broker to proceed with pursuing this strategy in order to get grocers to look at this building again. I also at the convention met with Walmart to pitch the vacant Winn-Dixie for one of their neighborhood stores. They confirmed what I already knew, that they had already looked at the building and passed on it, but they told me the reason why was because Winn-Dixie did not provide them the opportunity to pick and choose single store acquisitions. They had to look at it in a group acquisition mode. With the developments towards buying out the Winn-Dixie lease being a possibility now, Walmart, I think, will take another look at the purchase of the store as a single store purchase. At least now the opportunity is available for them to do so. At the convention, I also met with the shopping center owner of the Diamond Oaks shopping center and learned that another long-term Winn-Dixie lease has caused or complicated the situation and prevented the antique mall from expanding, because that's what they wanted to do. It also complicates the shopping center owner from filling that building. I met also with the Haltom Plaza shopping center owner, learned that the Blockbuster was not allowed to downsize in accordance with their national marketing plan, which they've done with many stores throughout the Metroplex, and that's why that space is now vacant. I was able to introduce a new video chain to the owner of the shopping center and put them together, so hopefully they can pursue filling that space with another video chain. Also, at the convention, I was able to market the area that we call the Haltom Beach area, and to Quality Developer, and I was able to do that by bringing to their attention the frontage road that is now open. We had aerials at the convention that I took with me, and will continue to use to market that area. Speaking of the frontage road there at 820, I've also recently worked with design engineers in my analysis of the preliminary designs that have existed for several years now for the widening of 820, and have determined that there are some improvements needed to maximize our development opportunities for economic development along 820. One example is the fact that southbound traffic on I-35 will not be provided with an off-ramp to Beach Street in the current preliminary plans. And by working with this design engineer, we have determined a strategy to combat that problem, and I will be working in the months ahead to pursue improving that access in conjunction with the overall plans for 820 to be widened. In addition to pursuing new businesses for Haltom City, we also work with existing businesses to retain them and help them expand. For several months now, I've been working to prevent a major retailer from leaving Haltom City in response to aggressive attempts by a neighboring city to use economic development incentives to entice him to do so. I'm pleased to announce tonight that working with this retailer and a local real estate broker, we have not only retained the current business, but have now put together a plan to significantly improve and enlarge his current business investment in the Belknap corridor. Part of his reinvestment includes expanding by adding a currently vacant 36,000 square foot building to his retail operations on Belknap. This would convert this currently vacant building to the generation of sales tax. He also plans to improve his two existing buildings to maximize his per square foot sales, and this will greatly enhance the image of the Belknap corridor. So unlike the Kmart and the Winn-Dixie, which we could do nothing to prevent them from leaving, we now have the opportunity to retain what I would consider to be an anchor of the Belknap corridor, and not only that, but to convert a currently sizable vacant building on the Belknap corridor to retail sales tax generation. We plan to do that by taking this retailer's proposals to the Economic Development Corporation in the next few weeks, in conjunction with a grant request for an economic development assistance grant to facilitate his plans.
Thank you, Kent. Councilmember Fowler, I believe your light is on.
That's all right, Mayor. I'll defer for later comments.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. Kent, this aerial you handed out, you don't have the the western portion of this highlighted? Is there a particular reason?
That's the only area I had available. We have some others. I just couldn't copy them for tonight. I had some others that did show.
I mean, okay, so this is your marketing this piece of property right here.
That property and the property adjacent to it.
Both of them?
Yes, there's 160 acres there altogether.
Right, okay. Just curious, I didn't.
Anything further? Lots of things are going on.
You bet.
Trying to fill up buildings and bring new businesses to Haltom City. Councilmember Sutton.
Just one comment. I've heard within the Vietnamese community there are some entrepreneurs in our midst that are wanting to expand. Has anybody contacted them about the possibility of their expansion plans?
As a matter of fact, the STEP project that Tom Muir just told you had been let for construction, that is the landscaping project on Belknap that we've been eagerly awaiting. We had anticipated that would be a catalyst to reinvestment by private businesses along the way once they saw us putting in this landscaping and improving the overall appearance of the corridor. What is in fact happening is just the opposite. We are having more interest in the Belknap corridor than I've seen since I've been here, certainly, and probably in the last 10 years. We have a 12,000 square foot shopping center under construction. We have 2 possible restaurants being considered, one of those by a Vietnamese individual. Of course, the Asian market is going great guns. Part of the proposal of the 36,000 square foot building that I mentioned is to put some lease spaces along the front of it, and that is being entertained also by some Vietnamese merchants. So the Asian market is healthy, and there's just lots of things happening on Belknap. It's really amazing.
Appreciate that update.
Anything further for Kent? Thank you, Kent.
You bet.
We move now to the boards and commissions. First of all, we need to address resignations. Do we have any resignations to be brought for ratification tonight? Councilmember Williams?
About Mr. Finn?
Yes, I have that, and we'll be, yes. Your light came back on. Did you have? Okay. I do have 3 resignations that I need to bring forth at this time and ask for ratification. First, to the Beautification Board, David Harper. I had talked with David, and David felt like he needed to make a change and would like to be relieved from his appointment. And in a moment, when we make new appointments, I have a place David has graciously consented to serve. From the Fire Services Board, Mr. Royce Gamble, who has done a great job for us for many years, said his health beginning to show up a little bit. He had several things going. He just needed to be relieved at the moment. And on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Johnny Finn has resigned due to health conditions. So I'm respectfully requesting ratification of these 3 resignations. If you'll display that. Okay, that passes. Do we have any other resignations? There being none, I'll move now to appointments and reappointments, and I think we probably have several to be done tonight. Councilmember Sutton?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have 7. For beautification, I'd like to appoint Wayne Clowers, that lives at 5809 Highland Street. For library, I'd like to nominate Dan Lewis, that lives at 4812 Springview Court. For Parks and Recreation, I'd like to reappoint Deanne Russell, that lives at 3924 Menn Street. Planning and Zoning, I'd like to appoint Evan Jackson at 5008 Nadine Drive. Zoning Board of Adjustment, I'd like to appoint Sandra Logan, who lives at 5645 McGregor Drive. For Fire Services, I'd like to appoint Jim Bannister at 5032 Roxy Street. And for Crime Prevention, I'd like to nominate G.H. Rumbaugh. And I'm going to pass these down to the Secretary.
Okay, you have heard Councilmember Averett. Did you have a point of order?
Question regarding one of his
Yes, certainly.
qualifications.
Yes.
The individual you're proposing we appoint to planning and zoning?
Yes.
What type of a background does this individual have?
He has an engineering degree.
Okay, thank
you.
Okay, you have heard Councilmember Sutton's request for ratification of these appointments. If you'll display your vote for ratification. And that passes. Okay. Councilmember Branson.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have several appointments. I did not write down the addresses, but their applications are in the notebook. To the Beautification Board, I'd like to reappoint Betty Porter. To the Fire Services Board, Sue Austin. To the Library Board, Belinda Clarkson. Parks and Recreation, Kimberly Reese. Planning and Zoning, William Nickel. And the ZBA, Dale Davis.
Okay. You have heard the recommendations by Councilmember Branson for ratification. If you'll indicate your vote in that regard. And that passes by unanimous vote. I have several to make. First of all, Councilmember Sutton.
Yeah, just real briefly, after you make your nominations, I have something I need to say in reference to one of the boards.
Okay. I have 5 reappointments. Crime Prevention, Vicki Burton. Library, Rexanne Grove. Parks and Rec, Roland Kuhlman. Planning and Zoning, Juanita Adam. And Civil Service, Bob Yates. So those are my reappointments. Let me go ahead and give you my new appointments. On the Beautification Board, C.C. Oaks. On the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Place 8, an alternate place, Darren Hudson. On Zoning Board of Adjustment, Place 9, David Harper. And those are the appointments and reappointments I'm requesting ratification of at this time. And that passes by unanimous vote. I do have 2 reappointments to make that do not need council ratification, and they are for the commissioners down at the Haltom City Housing Authority. I'm simply reappointing Commissioner Darrell Smith and the residential commissioner, Gwen Hamilton, who, by the way, has recently married, and her last name is Yarbrough. So while I'm not asking for ratification of those appointments, I am asking the city secretary, if she will, to notify Ms. Claire Tyner, the director of the Haltom City Housing Authority, that the mayor has reappointed those 2 commissioners. Councilmember Sutton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The chairman of the ZBA made a request because they're having a meeting tomorrow night, and the issue, the agenda is already set that the nomination for my place take effect after the meeting, and so I'd ask that to take place, if that would be okay with Bob. Is that catch it? And Sandra, if that would be okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
no problem regarding that.
All right.
Do we have any other appointments or reappointments to be made at this time? Okay, there being none. There being none, we don't have any attendance, excused absence of council members, and with that, having addressed all the items on the agenda, the council will move at this time into executive session as authorized under section 551.071, .072, and .074. And we will reconvene into regular session to take any action deemed necessary. From executive session, the time is 1:25. One of the items posted on the executive agenda was to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment duties, discipline, or dismissal of the municipal court judge. The council has some action to take at this time, and I'm open for motion regarding that. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. On the agenda item of the appointment of the court judge of the Municipal Court of Record, I make a motion that we appoint Kyle Knapp to serve in that position for 2 years.
Councilmember Henderson.
That's for a second, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Sutton.
Yeah, I think that Kyle Knapp is a great judge, and he has really served well in the interim period. But at this time, I feel like it would be more advantageous to have an interview process. And so I will be voting no, but I feel confident that if I'm overruled, that Kyle will do a great job for Haltom City.
Okay. Any further comments? Councilmember Averett.
Mayor, I would just like to echo my colleague's sentiments about, I believe it would be more advantageous for us to go out and seek applicants and also begin an interview process.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote then regarding the motion to appoint Judge Knapp for the next 2 years as municipal judge. And that passes 4 votes in favor and 3 opposed. Congratulations on your appointment, Judge. And there being no further action, no further items for the council.